Good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames Conference Board to order. Good evening, everybody. We're glad to see everyone here for January 28th, 2020. And the first item will be a roll call of those in attendance. Rachel?
Ames City Council,
Here.
Here.
Story County Board of Supervisors,
Here.
Ames Community School District,
Here.
Gilbert Community School District, Nevada Community School District,
Here.
United Community School District.
Here.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. And just by from the standpoint of information, we have there are three collective vote or three total votes that we can have. Cass and I. One will be from the council, one will be from all the school boards, and then one will be from the board of supervisors. And if when we call for a motion or call for a vote, if I discern that there's not a unanimous vote, then I'll make sure that I find out if you have a majority, and then that will register your vote. So in other words, if I'll pick on the board of supervisors, if we have 2 in favor, 1 against, then I'll call that motion as passed from your standpoint. Obviously 1 to 2 failed, and then that will be how it'll be registered, because there's only be 3 votes actually registered in the record, because we're actually voting as a complete entity. So all the school boards, same way, and then council, the same way. All right?
Mayor, I don't want to cause unnecessary difficulty here, but in reading the rules for the conference board, I read that it said at least 2 members of a voting unit must be present in order to vote.
So yes, we have that.
Each of the voting units are.
School
The
board.
school boards all counted.
School
Thank
board
you.
count as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Item 2, entertain a motion on approving minutes of the February 26, 2019 meeting.
Move approval.
Okay, and also for point of clarification, Amber from City Council voted or moved. We need a second from either the school board contingent or from the supervisor. All right, second from Merkin. Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 3-0. Okay, next item on the agenda is we need to appoint another individual to the Board of Review, and Jamie Larson, who has been on the Board of Review before, has consented to being reappointed. I'd entertain a motion, excuse me, entertain a motion resolving to approve Jamie Larson, the Board of Review.
So moved.
Is there a second from school board or supervisor?
Second.
All right, school board, Jeanette. All right, we need a, actually a roll call. So we'll start with council then.
Story County Board of Supervisors,
Aye.
Ames Community School District,
Aye.
Nevada Community School District,
Aye.
United Community School District,
Aye.
Ames City Council.
Aye.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right, item 4, discussion of city assessor's budget proposals, and I believe that Assessor Lynch will present a report and discuss the budget.
Well, good evening, and I thank all of you for coming to this meeting. Hopefully, everybody got a copy of the conference board report, and you've looked at it. So to spare the regurgitation of the narrative part of it, I would like to just open it up for questions from pages 1 through 8. That's not the 9 starts with a budget proposal is. So if there are any questions on those pages, I'll answer them to the best of my ability.
Any questions for Greg?
Mayor,
Loris?
Loris Olson, Board of Supervisors. I did email these 3 questions to them in advance so that they were aware of
Sure.
them. My first question is, please elaborate on what types of work the interns would do that would cost $40,000, given that the costs have been lower the last couple years.
And I'll defer that to Brendan. I think she'll be able to answer that better than I can.
Okay, do you want to do that or okay?
We've recently
implemented a content management system. So we've got backloads of documents to scan and get metadata associated with them, get those into our system. We've also got a citywide photo project that we've been doing when we have somebody available to do it. And we've just barely scraped the outer edge of the city on that. So that's going to involve a lot more hours. Also, we still have got our condominium units to enter into our new CAMA system. We've got all the houses, duplexes, commercial parcels in, but not the condominiums. And I've advertised a couple times on the Chamber's Work in Ames site and the university's student job board, and have gotten basically no response. So we're going to have to increase our salary or our hourly wage.
Thank you. So my next question is, why were there so many condominium appeals in 2019? Was there a particular reason that over 22% of them then were upheld? And is that an unusually high amount to be upheld?
Well, it's kind of a three-part question, so I'll try to answer them. The first one, as far as the reason why so many of them were filed, this year there's, what happens with assessments is there's an entity called tax representatives. And these are people that contact property owners, generally commercial property owners, and they sell themselves and their services by saying, if you let me represent you, you won't have to pay me a dime, but if I save you money on your taxes for future years, I'll get a certain percentage of that. So there's no cost to the current property owner. He has nothing to lose. So what happened this year is one tax rep filed over 600 protests on apartments, hoping that they would be lowered so they would get a percentage of those. So that was the reason I believe that so many were actually filed. And then the second part of it was,
Was it is that an unusual?
no, but when we revalued, we've had more than that in the past. Like, if we revalue onto odd years, I think one year we had 1,500, one year we had maybe 1,200. So that was not. And then what was the final one was,
That takes care of it, for that question.
okay.
And then, thank you, Mayor, my final one. Okay. Why is the question about the taxable status of Northcrest Independent Living in litigation now? Aren't the most of those units at least 20 years old? I remember they were here when I got here in 2002. So what's going on, please?
Sure. The existing units are that old, but what they're doing is they're putting a very large addition on there. And they're adding independent living units and assisted living units and skilled nursing. So what has happened is in July or in 2018, the Property Assessment Appeal Board had a ruling in the case of Community Housing Initiatives versus Polk County Board of Review that I believe sheds new light on this type of a property. After reading that ruling, and then conversing with other assessors who have continuum life services complexes, and talking with them, most of them all have their independent units classified as taxable, but they still keep the skilled nursing and assisted living as exempt. So what we've done this last year is Northcrest bought a property to the west of them, have torn that down, and they're in the process of building this new complex. So for 2019, I made just the land value under that portion of the property taxable, knowing that in fact this will probably go to district court. And yes, the current exempt status was placed on it by a ruling of the Iowa Supreme Court in 1989. So it had gone to the Supreme Court prior to this. But again, I believe with the new ruling from PAB, that shed some new light on it. And that's the reason. It also follows through why we're asking for some extra money for outside counsel.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other questions for Greg? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion approving the recommendations of the assessor's report.
Move approval?
Is there a second from board of supervisors or school board?
Second.
All right.
And then now we can move to page,
Let's vote first. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, now on to the proposed budget.
yes, if we could, I think that's page 9. Starts on page 9. And I know the first question would be how we arrived at the 3% cost of living and the 2% merit. And currently, the city is negotiating with different unions, and they're using a 2.75 to 3% cost of living as a negotiating starting point. So we thought 3% would be fair to stay in that range. The 2% merit rate is we've always followed whatever the city did in that capacity. And this year they're asking for 2% merit, so we would ask for that too. Again, merit pay is based upon how I believe the employees have met some of the jobs and performances that they were trying to achieve during the year. That's also based upon how well that employee did and how much work they got done.
Could I ask a follow-up question on that?
Sure.
I understand that you would have a process for evaluating the employees, but there are separate budget lines for your salary and the deputy salary.
Yes.
So when it comes to the merit-based portion of that salary, what's the process for determining whether to award to you and the deputy?
Well, when it first was set up, I believe Richard brought that up to the mini conference board. It was discussed then.
Richard?
Richard Horn, excuse me, my predecessor.
I see.
So I just followed the example set by that process.
And what is the process?
Well, when it's presented to the mini board, they would.
Oh, they're the reviewing entity then?
I think so. Yeah, it's the first time that question's been asked, so.
Well, I think a lot of us here were not here when Richard Horn was here, so I think it's more or less just curious, and we thought it'd best to ask the question, so. Okay, other questions on, let's just go through this. Any questions on the payroll or related expenses, which is the top portion of the sheet?
I have a question,
Certainly.
Mayor. I believe we talked about this at the mini assessors meeting, but with those percentages, that 3% or that 2% increase, if the city, since you said you kind of mirror what the city does, if the city does not increase that amount, let's say they only do a 1% or a 2%, then what is?
We would match that, yeah.
Then you
We
match
would
that, so you-
reflect, yeah. Years ago, it was agreed upon by the mini conference board and our office that whatever the city got is what we would get. If they backed off, then we would back off. That's never been the case in all the time I've been here. Actually, we have fallen behind because they negotiated higher than what we asked for.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the payroll and related expenses? Okay, hearing none, let's go on to the total office expenses. Any questions for Greg on this second category of expenses?
I have a question about the fiber expense.
Sure.
I'll just tell the others that we had a phone conversation about the it's $3,600 fiber expense in the blue box, second line in the blue data processing services box. And I'm thinking it might be possible to eliminate that expense through the use of VPNs and the city's networking capability already. And I understand that you're intending to look into this.
Yes, we'll look into it. And
Good. Just
I think
wanted.
there might be other city departments that use that fiber line too. So
That
it's
would-
just not us. So
yeah,
it would be
okay. So
consideration for other, but yeah, we will look into it and see if it's possible.
great. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to let others know that was going on. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this category?
Greg, could you say something about the 57.4% increase in the equipment rental and maintenance? What is causing that giant leap?
Well, I think if I could, I'll defer to our accountant, and that would be Dawn. She would be able to much better explain that than myself.
Let me get my
right sheet on that. Okay. So let's see, for equipment rental and maintenance, we are talking, we have one of the equipment items we're purchasing is a new server. And there is a care package for that. It covers 5 years. And that comes in at $3,277. So that is the major portion of that. Then we also have our copier fax print machine. Our maintenance is covered by the number of copies we make. So for black copies versus color copies. And because we are going to have a new model for 2021, we will, of course, be generating more assessment rolls, more costs that way. So those are probably the two big ones. I also have some other extended service plans and stuff, but one's $366 and the other one's $263. So
And as long as you're up here,
Yes.
I'll just ask, the other rather large jumps in postage and mailing and Board of Review expenses, I assume are because we're going to be having the revaluation. and-
yeah, with the
okay.
new model and stuff, yeah. It's just, paper supplies and the postage to mail them out. And then, of course, Board of Review will have more cases and so more of their expenses because they pay for their own postage with that line item, so.
Thank you.
Any others on expenses before?
Other questions? Okay. And then Greg, maybe if you would just review just briefly, I don't have any questions, but maybe just for everyone's benefit again, you hire a consultant who is well recognized in the assessment field to help updating residential. And can you guys explain that this is not an annual cost? This is
Sure.
kind of goes on, it comes and goes. So
Through the years, I became acquainted with a person named Bob Glaudeman. And over the years at IAAO conventions, we would talk. And I learned that, in fact, we both went to Iowa City at the same time. He was there getting his master's degree in statistics, and I think I was probably getting a minor in partying. So our paths didn't cross very often on campus. So I called him and asked him, I said, Bob, we need to build a new model, and we have good sales database. Would you be able to recommend somebody to me? And he thought about it, and he said, well, why wouldn't you want me to do it? And I said, well, I would love for you to do it, but he does the whole of Iceland. I mean, he does 600,000-700,000 parcels at a time. And our 20,000, I thought, wouldn't really be something an endeavor he would like to undertake. But to my surprise, he said, yes, he would like to. So Bob built us a model for 2017, and now we will build another model for 2021.
can you explain what that model does?
Oh, sure. The model, it uses multiple regression, and it's a statistical package that uses all the cells that are considered good for analysis and draws basically a straight line through them, and then it measures how far off that line, either additions or subtractions, say how many an extra bedroom would be worth or what the market would anticipate 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms compared to 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It has I think we had 20 coefficients that the model gives us. And there are different statistical measures that you use to measure the model. And that was one of the better models that Bob said he had put together. So he commended us on our data, but I would have to pass that along to staff and to my predecessor because they had the data in a database that was easy to model. So
The whole goal is to help get a good baseline so that you can accurately assess residential properties.
Yes.
And fairly represent them.
and purely on a sales comparison basis.
Okay. Any questions for Greg on either that topic or the district course case that is a line item as well too? Okay. And just to Lisa's comment, this is a maximum budget. They could go down. They may not spend all the money. And also if the salaries don't go up, it's quite as much. It may come in lower too as well. So, okay, I entertain a motion to receive the proposed budget as presented.
I'd so move.
Is there a
Second.
Moved by Loris and second by Gloria. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we need to set a date of public hearing on the proposed FY 2021 City Assessor's budget. So I entertain a motion to set 6 PM on February 25th, 2020 as a date of public hearing on proposed FY 2021 City Assessor's budget.
So moved.
Moved and
Second?
seconded by Jeanette. Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 5, resolution approving reappointment of Greg Lynch as city assessor. Oh, you want to sit down? I don't, Greg and I have talked just a little bit. I think we talked last year actually, but the amount of education and the amount of certification required by assessors is absolutely amazing to me. And Greg has really undertaken a lot of that. And actually last year you were eligible for reappointment because you qualified with all the continuing education that was
Correct.
necessary, passed all your written tests. And your appointment will expire at the end of this year. Is that correct?
Correct, December 31st.
So it's up to this board to reappoint. It's a 6-year term. And so any questions or any discussion? Thank you, Greg. Any questions or discussion on this particular topic this evening?
I guess my only question is it by ordinance that you have an assessor? I don't recall. I remember we had a kind of conversation on it.
Yes, the Iowa code allows cities, I think when it was first written, it was a population of over 10,000. If they wanted to, they could have a statute and have their own city assessor as in addition to a county assessor.
Right. So do you have to do something by resolution as well, or is it just by vote through tonight? I
Oh,
guess
this
what
would be
I'm-
resolution, a resolution.
This is the
Yes.
resolution. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I entertain a motion on approving reappointment of Greg Lynch as city assessor for a 6-year term.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second? Any discussion? Roll call.
Ames Community School District,
Aye.
Nevada Community School District,
Aye.
United Community School District.
Aye.
Ames City Council,
Aye.
Story County Board of Supervisors.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Conference board comments. Gloria, start with you.
None tonight.
We'll go around the table here.
None from Nevada School Board.
All right.
Nothing.
Tim?
Nothing.
I have nothing.
I have a couple of things. First is that the city council recently met and went over our goals. And one of our goals was to improve our ability to reach people in geographic areas in the city. And one of the ways that we find people, of course, is using the Beacon site. And so I'm interested in the ability to use that sort of technology to reach people by email and phone numbers, which I believe is not supported right now for maybe it's policy reason, maybe it's technical reason. So I would ask the mini board members, is there anything you can say about that right now?
I had contacted Greg about it, and I have to go back and look at my email, but I think you contacted Beacon, and I think from what I gathered is the mini board needs to get in touch with Beacon with a little bit more research to
Yes,
fully kind of flush out their
I
capabilities.
spoke with Mike Morehouser, who is probably one of their best developers, and we've worked with him all through the years. He's been very good about getting stuff for us. And he said their real mission isn't collecting email and signatures, but they would perhaps might even be able to write a code in a module. It would be an add-on module. He wasn't sure how it would work because that's the first time it had been, he had had that approach to him. But again, I've given Amber Mike's contact information, and that would be a good source, I think, to try to ferret out whether or not that would be possible.
Great, thank you very much for that answer. That's helpful.
Well, I appreciate that, David, too, because the point is that could also be used by, the Ames School District, potentially Story County Board of Supervisors and others that have people in the Story County board. And the whole goal is to push information out in as many means as possible. So it could be, it's not just for city council, but it also be leveraged. And I know security is a big concern, and this is an area that David extremely well equipped. So I said, how about security? So, oh, that can be figured out. So
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize that I think it would be a very bad idea to just find everyone's email address and put them on public web pages.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's not what we're
Right.
talking about. It would have to be a lot more.
it's a way to kind of
carefully
hide it or whatever,
Sure.
and we can somehow extract it.
designed. So thanks for that report. And
Wait, Loris, did you have a comment or question?
Well, I had a question, a follow-up question. Mary, you answered part of it, or maybe you did. But so since they don't collect them to begin with, how would they be charging us, the conference board?
We don't know.
additional
We don't
money?
know any of that yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
we haven't gotten that far. Right.
Good question, and that's something that I think that we want to delve into and find out and see if it becomes an issue or not. So,
They
David?
usually charge us for add-ons.
pardon me?
They usually charge
I'm
us
sure
for
they do.
add-ons.
Okay.
Certainly for development, they'll
Yeah.
charge.
Yes.
Okay. David?
And my other issue just has to go back to the merit portion of the salary increases. And I want to state this very carefully. I really respect the work of the city assessor's office, and this is not intended to express any sort of dissatisfaction. It's just a process question for us. For example, the city council hires the city manager, and we have a process for evaluating the city manager's raises, whereas the city manager determines the merit pool for his employees.
Sure.
And so I guess let me just make a motion. I would move to ask the mini board to report on the process for evaluation of the assessor and the deputy, and send a memo to the conference board on that topic within, say, 6 months.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion?
So just to clarify, how is it we might want to do something different?
Right now, I'm only asking to discover what is being done. And I guess that report could also include a recommendation for doing something, but I don't think there's clarity even on how it's being done.
And that's not something Steve can provide you?
No, he's not on
No.
this board.
But I mean, does he have knowledge of how this is done?
Well, could the mini board not?
The answer is that there is not a process. When we approve the budget with there's not a formal review process that I'm aware of. I just joined the mini board, obviously, but it meets once a year. And we approve the budget that includes the merit increases and the cost of living increases. And that is the process. So if we want to talk about a formal review process, that's fine. We can certainly discuss that as a mini board. Certainly, we will have to meet off of our normal 1 year cycle, which is fine as well. But there's not a formal review process in place right now.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Other questions or discussion?
I have some questions. Who exactly are we talking about as being members of this mini board? It's my impression that all members of the conference board are invited to be part of the mini board. Isn't that correct?
No,
We're
they're
all invited.
actually appointed.
Yeah.
Each body or entity appoints one individual. For example, for city council, Amber's appointed, and then I believe Lisa, you're appointed from board supervisor, and then one person from each school board is appointed. So the school board appoints a representative. Let me see who we have. We have Jamet is for the Ames. Joe, you are for Nevada. And there's, I presume you would probably maybe the one for United. And then Gilbert would also have one. So each entity appoints one representative. And so the school district, actually be 4 school district representatives, 1 city council. And that's the way it's been set up. And one supervisor. That's how
May I ask, how was that set up and who set that up?
That was in existence when I came back
I'm
in
not- well, I know-
2006.
I understand that many boards have been around and some, I believe some jurisdictions use them and some do not. I'm not aware of any legal basis of a mini board that has that kind of a power, but I'm relatively new to this.
We don't necessarily hold any power because everything that we do comes back to the full conference board for approval. So we just make recommendations to the full conference board.
And I think it was set up originally to minimize the
Yeah.
amount of discussion that would take place at the full conference board. So if you went over the budget, you looked at it, then you would report back with your colleagues and your your entity and discuss if there is anything that you want to ask us ahead of time to resolve, so we don't, it'd be very hard to answer those questions from Loris had I not had my ahead of time.
Joe, I'd be happy to, I'd be happy to have the city clerk get that information. We can send it out to all the board members if the history and how it was set up and under what provisions, if that would be helpful for you.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
We'll do that, okay?
And then I'll just comment that my motion was just to ask for a report rather than to actually take any other action. I think if we were to take action, then of course it would be the conference board that would do that.
Did you have more questions, Joe?
I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
So I'm wondering whether Amber just gave the report that your motion
Yeah.
asked for.
Could be. If we understand the scope of the motion to be able to recommend alternatives, I guess I didn't say that, recommend alternatives in the motion, but mini board could certainly meet and do that under this motion, I would
Do
say.
you wish to add that to your motion?
If you find it necessary, I'm happy to.
Let's have clarity then.
Okay. I would move to amend the motion by adding to the scope of the report recommendations for changing the process of evaluation.
Loris, are you amenable to that?
Agreement with
Okay.
that.
All right. Very good. All right. Anything else? All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anything else, David?
No, thank you.
Jeanette?
No, thank you.
Brahman?
Nope, nothing for me.
How about you? This is not going well. I'm so sorry. Sorry. Let's see. Yeah, if you had your name tag, it would really help. Linda, anything for you?
No, thank you.
Loris?
No, thank you.
No,
All
thank
right.
you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you for coming. Good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council to order on January 28th, 2020. Welcome, everybody. First item on the agenda is consent and council. Item 18 is being pulled. We do not have a signed agreement as of yet. Is there anything else that council wishes to pull this evening?
Mayor, I'd like to pull item 19.
Anything else?
Mayor, item 15, please.
Is that it? All right, entertain a motion approving consent less items 15, 18, and 19.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call?
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, David?
Item 15, this is the resolution approving the quarterly investment report for the period ending December 31st, 2019. And this goes to an issue that we discussed at our goal setting session as well, having to do with whether the city and the council understands the role that our investment portfolio might be playing, if any, in climate change activities such as fossil fuel investments or renewable energy investments. I think we just don't understand that. We don't know whether it's possible to understand that. So I see Roger, is that right?
Yes.
If you could comment on that initially. I have a motion I'd like to make, but I'd like to hear from you first.
Mainly our investment portfolio is in bank CDs, government agencies, U.S. Treasuries. Probably 90% of our portfolio is invested in that. So government agencies are mostly dealing with farm loans, farm credits, or mortgages through Federal Home Loan Bank, Freddie Mac's, Fannie Mae's, those type of investments. The other 5 to 10% is in commercial paper. And that's where we may have a chance to be invested in some of those that you're concerned with. But mostly the commercial paper that we buy is with financial groups, so large banks like Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi or Santander Bank, which is based out of Boston. Those are some of the current ones we've had. So they're mostly in banking, financial investment, those types of areas.
Have you undertaken a study of the investments in order to say this, or is this something more that I know I didn't tell you in advance that I was going to ask this, so I just don't know whether you've done research on this or not.
Yes, I do research on these investments before I do place the funds with our brokers. But as to
this metric, though,
to what the underlying where the funds are going once we invest, no, I have not.
I see. Okay, so I would move to ask you to investigate the role that the investment portfolio plays in climate change, for example, by fossil fuel or renewable energy investments beyond what you're already aware of.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor, I would kindly remind council that this is irrelevant to the matter we have at hand. This is a consent agenda item that's purely looking at the performance of these investments. And I don't think it's germane to the purpose of this matter on the docket. If a council member wants to bring up a policy matter like that, then let's put that on the agenda and have a conversation.
Or, yeah, that is appropriate to move that motion to council comments, and then we can decide if you want to put it on the agenda or not discuss it. Yeah, I think your point's well taken. Resolution approving quarterly investment report is basically, are we going to approve the report through December 31st, 2019 or not?
If council prefers, I'm happy to take this up during council comments. I thought it would actually be most convenient when we actually have the treasurer in front of us. Yeah. I have every intention of moving to accept the report as issued.
Yeah. All right, let's move it to council comments and
very good.
Right, very good. right.
So
Withdraw the motion.
I will withdraw the motion, and I would move to accept the report.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thanks, Roger.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, all right. Gloria.
So I pulled item 19 primarily because it involves parking, but also to give Susan an opportunity to say something about why we need that additional parking for this particular eco-fair event.
Good evening. We are very excited to have this item on the agenda because it's a very special Eco Fair this year. I hope you all know it's the 10th anniversary of the Eco Fair and the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And so those things together combined make 2020 a very special year. We have asked for the closure of the street in order to expand the Eco Fair this year to have more of an outdoor presence. We wanted to showcase some of our eco-friendly public works vehicles, including our plows that are using biofuel, as well as, we hope, some of our hybrid police vehicles. We also hope to have our electric car display, which Mark Steffen, Ames resident, has done for us for several years, and we are welcoming him back again to do that, and perhaps even go beyond that to having some food trucks if we can get them to commit. So we're very excited. We have a lot of events planned in conjunction with the Eco Fair, including tonight is our first Eco Chat, which unfortunately you are missing, but it is being recorded and it will be available on our video archive, as well as some additional Eco Chats on Wednesday, February 26th and Monday, March 30th. So I hope you'll be able to attend.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
So the other reason I pulled this was just to call attention to the fact that while the city is asking for the closure of the street, the parking fees are not being waived. They are being paid by the event. So we have on our agenda later a discussion of policy. I just thought it was worth noting what's being done in this instance.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I would move approval.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to public forum. This is time that public can address council on topics of city business, but items that are not listed on the agenda. And council, I have a card from Christina Brecky, and since she has a topic or an item under dispositions and we don't take public input on that, I told her that it'd be appropriate for her to address council on this particular topic. So Christina, if you want to come up, introduce yourself, your address, and ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Thank you.
Hello, Council. I'm Christina Brecky from Huxley, Iowa, 203 Campus Avenue. And I just wanted to address you just because I feel that in an email, it can get really wordy. So I just thought it'd be faster if I could just talk about my plea to you in this sense. I feel that the zoning at the mall, restricting the sale of fireworks, is doing some sort of a disservice to consumers. It'd be better if we were more accessible up in the north part of town, just because we really emphasize education. And I feel that there's a lot of people that are concerned about the safety of people with fireworks. And we are also concerned that way. We've all, as our family-owned business and operated by our family, we've taken pyrotechnics display operator courses. We've done the Pyrotechnics Guild International Conventions. We've just immersed ourselves in fireworks and learning from other people, safety. So when we sell fireworks, we are hands-on experience, knowledgeable, knowing how to explain to customers the best way to light the firework. We also have hands-on experience with our products that we sell. A lot of people that work at the fireworks tents in Ames are volunteers, or they can't just take a product off the shelf and try it at home to know what that does. I've seen a helicopter at another location, and I said, "Does this go up?" And they're like, "Yeah, it goes up." I take it home and it just blows up. It doesn't go up. We just have practical things in our stand where we have bricks to not only tell people how to do them, we are there to show them physically with the tools that they would need at home to do things safely. Buckets of sand, gallon jugs of water, just because people don't think about the water until after they're done and they need water. So we're there to remind them, hey, here's a gallon of water with a lid. You can just take it with you where you want to go and it's not going to spill. But always be prepared, be prepared, be prepared. So I think if you open up the zoning in the north side of town, that's going to help us be of service to the community. People can find us easier to learn these lessons that are not easily available for consumers out there. I just want to encourage you to really think about how this benefits the whole community, not just our issue itself. So,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you very much. Is anybody else that wish to address council under public forum? Seeing none, we'll close public forum and we'll move on to item 29, Ames Comprehensive Plan 2040 Preferred Land Use Scenarios. Council, I have offered to you some time estimates, and I would like to just suggest tonight that we spend 30 minutes after Kelly gives a brief introduction, just open discussion. We haven't had that opportunity to do that yet. And allow some time for public input for anyone who's not addressed council before on this topic, or if they do address council, it's on a new point that they're covering on this topic, and then take the last 15 minutes for discussion and motions. But certainly I don't want to constrain anyone if we have a robust conversation, but shooting to try and have this wrapped up in about an hour. So Kelly, you want to just give us a little bit of a quick snapshot, and then we'll have council discussion.
So we really don't have anything new to present to you. We went through in great detail on December 19th at a workshop, the work performed by RDG and HDR as our consultants to prepare analysis on major infrastructure issues related to the 4 scenarios that we were directed to prepare. So the slide that I put up here is that compilation of the original kind of land use mix that was the July information that we worked on. And then the slide on the right, which is the tiers, the purple, the green, the blue, and the orange, is the information that you had seen in December that's then tied in the presentation to cost estimates related to different things for traffic, water, sanitary sewer, other fire station facilities. So for tonight's conversation, I'm just going to leave this slide up here. Again, I don't have new information to present. You took public comment on January 7th. You had a number of speakers. Over 20 people came and spoke at that meeting. In your packet, you have the memo where you asked for some concepts or ideas from staff and RDG about what would be reasons that would influence a choice about a direction or a type of development maybe that you would look for. And then we also gave you the updated public input document, which captured the input for this component of the project, meaning the scenario. So you have a very lengthy public input document that should be attached to your packet as well. All of this is posted on the Planning Division website under Ames Plan 2040. No new information was created in the last few weeks. So this is what's been available for the last month. And I'm really turning it back over to you to take public comment. And I'm just here to answer questions.
Kelly, can you, you've asked for some direction from council. What specifically might that look like, for example?
Right. So what we're looking for as the team for the council is to understand geographically where you're going. Up until now, you've said plan for 15,000 people. So we prepared scenarios that showed at least 15,000 people could be accommodated individually in different parts of the city. RDG took a stab at different options of mixing and matching across these different scenarios. Again, keeping that 15,000 person target in mind. So what we'll do with direction tonight or direction in the future, what we need to know is which geography or which direction you're interested in. If it's broken into tiers, is it all in one area? And then what we're going to do with that direction is go back and revisit our planning assumptions, which are really that scenario example on the top left. So if you cut a scenario in half and say that's not where we believe growth is going to happen, or we don't want to do that, we're going to go back and relook at the tiers that you do pick, and then come back to council as one of the workshop items, possibly on the 18th, It might be a little tight in 3 weeks to get this figured out for you. If not, it'd be the next work item to come back with a land use map says, well, with this direction, here's the housing mix we think is doable. Here's how the other principles that you've given us to date would influence some of these decisions. So what you see on this scenario example will probably not be what you get back as the land use map. We'll want to follow that if we can, because we think there's some reasonable examples here of what land use would be. But that's the next step. We need to know where to focus on so we can come back with a reasonable and practical land use map.
So let's just say for sake of discussion, if council wants to go tier 1 in several different directions, and then one direction with more tiers and do infill, that's an option. Is that correct?
Yep. Any combination that you guys come up with, and whether it's one direction, multiple directions, factoring in other influences that aren't represented here on this map, that's the stuff we need to know to get to an actual preferred land use map, so you know where the plan is headed next.
Mm-hmm.
This is a exploratory exercise till now. It doesn't mean anything until we focus in on 15,000.
Is there a way, and maybe I won't use the right terminology, but let's say council agrees that we want to go in a certain direction, but we don't necessarily want to eliminate possibilities because we can't predict what's going to happen, obviously, years from now. Is there a way to reserve some of those outer areas without necessarily developing specific plans for them?
Yeah, so our recommendation as staff to you is that whatever you focus on as considered the more likely areas to develop in the next 20 years, we believe all of these areas, and maybe even a little bit broader area, should be reserved for future expansion. So we think the follow-up item is to adopt a policy that says we're going to reserve this for future expansion and not support rural residential development abutting the city just because we don't think in the next 10 years it's useful for city expansion. You don't have to do that tonight. That'll be a follow-up issue that comes along with the land use map and the drafting of the actual land use chapter for the plan. But the statement of that intent would be supportive of what staff is recommending. And I think you shouldn't get married to these exact tier boundaries the way they are. I mean, these were the best effort that RDG could do to kind of take apart their original land use diagrams. So if let's say you picked west and said, I want to do blue and green. Mm-hmm. Those might not be your final boundaries when we come back with the land use map. So don't get married to exactly that delineation, but that would be the sense of what we're trying to accomplish for you in a more precise land use map.
One of the questions I have, and that a lot of people have spoken about, is infill and how much we can expect to depend on infill to meet the population needs. So this would be coming later, but I'm just wondering, Kelly, would it be appropriate to ask for, in time for the workshop, a range of what we could push to expect with infill, or what we could expect or what we could push for with infill? And then I'm thinking both sort of the project-based infill and also policy and zoning-based changes that might allow a more gentle, gradual infill too. So that's something I was hoping to ask for when we get to it, but I'm just sort of I'm wondering if tonight is the time you would need that direction too.
If you want something specific, yes, tell us now. I think the two next items on the docket for you as a steering committee is to review a draft land use map, which I'm not promising you in 3 weeks because we were hoping for this direction previously a little more time. But the next one is the housing policies. Mm-hmm. So that question of infill and whether it's a policy issue about how housing is allowed to be developed in the city and in expanded areas, that's a discussion very soon for us.
Yeah.
Whether it shows up in the land use map or it's a policy discussion, it's coming very soon. But if there's something specific you want us to do, you should tell us tonight so we can prepare for that if it's possible, if we can in advance.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad that conversation will be coming, but I think it's also important to get some sort of number, a figure on the amount of infill, because up until this point, we've just said, oh, it'll be there. But
so the policy, so without knowing what the policy is, I probably can't give you that. What I think we are going to do for sure is even the scenario map doesn't reflect available vacant land that wasn't in these core scenario areas. So in addition to the tiers that you pick off of this map, For example, the recently annexed land off of Cedar Lane, that doesn't show up anywhere in here. So we'll put a number to some of these other areas that we think are perceived as additional areas that could be annexed or are vacant land in the city now. I wouldn't necessarily call that infill, but I'll give you a number kind of related to vacant land.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about infill as both a policy and as a project redevelopment component. So you'll probably have completely new growth, kind of take advantage of available vacant land, and then an infill discussion both at a policy and as a project-based concept.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And then you'll have kind of all four parts to look at and kind of decide how that fits for the whole land use plan element of the comp plan.
And it wouldn't have to be a firm number, just some sort of range of what we could get to and maybe what each piece of that would get us to.
So I'm confident on 3 of those 4. I think the policy is one where we have to hear more from the council about what that could include and what that means.
Okay.
And I don't know that we can do an economic forecast of how that would get absorbed into the system necessarily. But until I know what that is, I can't talk to RDG about how they would approach that question.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can you clarify what you mean, say what the policy is? Can you help us
I
understand?
think what's been stated at the last meeting or maybe on the 19th is, does infill include considering additional housing options on existing lots without scrape and rebuild?
Right.
So if you were
accessory
to
dwelling
say-
units,
Yeah.
to allow accessory dwelling units is like the primary one in my mind that I
So
think of. But
I'm not going to speak for RDG. I don't know if we said that was our new policy, what they would project as how many units a year you could expect the market to build. That would be a tough thing to answer.
Sure.
But if that's the direction of council, we'll visit about it and see what might be an example to pick on it.
yeah, maybe in places where it's recently been allowed and it hadn't been before. I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, that's the one I probably can't promise that we can give you a great answer on.
So Kelly, do we know anything more about what's happening east of I-35 on 13th?
So our last detailed conversation with the commercial developer, the Elwell companies, was late in the fall. They had said that if they hadn't reached an agreement with their own clients and on how that project would move forward, that they would kind of go into a holding pattern through Christmas. Well, Christmas is come and gone now. So I've reached out to them, but I haven't heard back on a proposed timing for that project. We knew it by the fall that obviously the Fleet Farm anchor was still in play, but that timeline for construction was a lot different than when they first came in April. So I do not have any more update than that we've reached back out to them now that Christmas is over to get a handle on if they're moving forward this year or not.
Okay. Any questions for Kelly? Council, what are your thoughts? Direction?
Want to get public input?
Doing public, yeah.
No, I'd ask that you'd first have conversation and they can go ahead and give input on your conversation and then we'll finish up then.
Oh.
I really want to see, we have yet at the dais had any kind of real serious conversation. I think that it's fair to have some discussion, amongst us and get some ideas what you're thinking. No emotions essentially, but and then we'll get public input.
So briefly, I think there are a lot of unknowns. I think this process has been very good for the community, and because we don't know what land is interested in selling, I think to select a particular direction is a bit of a risky move, and so I favor a tier 1 in all 4 directions coupled with infill.
So one of the questions that I've had is how are my council colleagues weighing the different factors in making these decisions? Because obviously we've got a lot of numbers that are given to us based on the infrastructure that already exists, how much future infrastructure would cost, the potential for housing certain numbers of people based on the different scenarios. And then there are those other more intangibles that we don't have measurements for, like what about the environmental concerns that we might have about developing further out from the core? I don't have a good sense of what my colleagues are weighing heaviest. Are you weighing the current infrastructure heaviest? Are you weighing the environmental concerns heaviest? Because I think that the mayor indicated he was hoping we were all kind of going to be on the same page with how we were putting things together. And we haven't had that discussion. And maybe nobody wants to have that discussion, but I'm going to put that out there.
Oh yeah, good question. So I kind of see Tim's point about leaving all possibilities open, but I think there's some inefficiency there that, that we're being asked to kind of pick at least a direction or two so that we can kind of focus our energies better rather than quite be so divided. And of the growth scenarios, the East is my least favorite. It's so cut off. I feel like that's a transportation related consideration, but also some sort of gut feeling about culture of a place. And I just feel like if we build out on the other side of nothingness and 35, I don't know that it'll ever feel like Ames. So I have this sort of sense about the Eastern being, just harder to culturally bring into the city. So I kind of liked, of the ones that RDG and staff had proposed, there was one of the potential scenarios was like was south, west, and north tier 1, or some combination of that. Like again, since East is my least favorite of them, that's kind of why I was leaning that way. I don't necessarily love the southwest because there's not a whole lot of room once you go farther south, but west was all right. And south, the more I look at that long term, I like that direction too, I think. So that's just kind of my impressions, but I'm using a lot of factors there, right? I'm looking at the cost of each of those, but also transportation, and that's, I think, why the East is my least favorite, because biking and pedestrian accessibility is going to be nil out there.
But that's only going to be for those people who are biking there. I mean, the vast majority of people will be driving. I mean,
that's
this
the
is
problem.
Not. It's what?
That's the issue.
Well, whatever direction we go, people are going to be driving.
But we don't. I don't want to design it where they have to drive. I would rather have a city be designed where it's connected to what's already city, or at least a better feel for connection than the East. I mean, that's pretty far out there.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of communities. Ankeny, for example, is now putting in substantial subdivisions on the east side of I-35. I mean, let's keep in mind, we think long term. Eventually, I think there's going to be development on the east side of I-35. We just don't know the timing of it. But I'm certainly wanting to champion the multi-trail connectivity. And I don't know for sure that it would never be connected with a multi-use trail. I think we have to think broadly to look at the entire potential for development. The other thing I would say is what we heard from RDG, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, the cost of development surprisingly is fairly consistent for all the directions.
Yeah.
That totally surprised me. Of everything we've looked at, the fact that those would be relatively consistent, that shocked me. So,
well, when you talk about roads and sewer, I mean, those costs, but like the fire station is borne by us. Well, if you go to the north, I mean, so that's a significant cost that's city borne, and the ongoing operations of it, But yeah, you're right. The roads and, getting the sewer to their properties, we pass that on to the developer unless we have a preferred growth area in which we don't, or we agree to cost share those sort of things to get people in there, in which case it is our cost. I mean, the East, I don't have to say like, no, we'll never go there ever. But if I had to pick my favorites, the East is not on that list. The other three.
We're at this point is that this is basically, let's get on a table what people are thinking about. Sure. And I think that Gloria had a good point. And what I heard Bronwyn say is one is transportation is one of the considerations. Another one is can we look at how can we develop something which is part and parcel of the overall fabric of the community? And also, if you can try and minimize the use of cars to get to certain places, that's an important piece. And so I think that answers in part what Gloria is saying. And maybe it's not as important or not as much of a factor, Tim, in your evaluation, which isn't wrong. Neither one's wrong. It's just more or less we're just getting out our orientation, and this is what we need to do kind of come to a consensus and move forward.
And you're right. I mean, as we grow east, there might be, I mean, industrial area is there and it might grow, but some industry is not super high numbers of staff, right?
Well-
so it depends on what we get over there.
Yeah, and I mean I agree with everything that you've said. Transportation's important, costs are important, even though they're all roughly the same. But I do think it's important to look at where our jobs are and making sure that we can accommodate people who do want to live near their work, and I think we can create a sense of place in those spaces, based on what our goals are. And so, I sort of tend to lean towards let's keep it as flexible as possible. We don't know what the market's going to do. I would hate to necessarily eliminate any options right off the bat. So if we can accommodate all of the tier ones in every direction, and then maybe we do have some targeted growth in the tier twos or further out in specific directions.
I think what I have heard as a sort of retrospective look at what's happened since the LUPP was put into effect in 1997 is that because there was only one direction of growth indicated, property prices became inflated, and ultimately we did not grow in the direction that the council determined would be the priority growth area because people didn't want to sell for a reasonable price. And so I would not like to see us putting ourselves in that same kind of position again, where we set a priority, the prices go up, and we end up growing in every direction but the priority direction because of those increased prices. So I think there is some advantage to looking at multiple areas to expand into the tier one at least to determine what happens in the future and where the preferences are for those people who are trying to get to jobs.
I agree with many of these considerations, and I think that it might be a mistake to conclude that because we put all our eggs in one basket in the past, we have to put our eggs in every basket going forward in the future. There is something in between, and it's guesswork, obviously, as to what the right balance is. But for that reason, I do support multiple areas. I kind of agree about the East, and mostly because of the community aspect of it. When I see a neighborhood that is cut off by a major highway, it really makes me wonder how much part of the community that will feel in the long run. And we've done that already. For instance, the Tea Garden neighborhood has been cut off by US 30 for a very long time. So it's not a showstopper, but all other things being equal, I like the idea of continuing the sort of tapestry of the city in a more organic direction that it's already established. So let me just go down my list. I think that we have to put significant resources into figuring out infill. People have said that loud and clear, and it's very hard for us to do. It's hard for anyone to do, but I think that we need to take our best shot and seeing what we can come up with in new forms of housing that really are closer in. Hope we can make that happen. Beyond that, I'm pretty enthusiastic about the South growth area. I think there's a lot to like about that, particularly its placement between Ames and Ankeny and Des Moines. I think it's very well placed for people who are going to the work sites in Ames and elsewhere. And good sewer connection and that sort of thing. I think that's a neat opportunity. I'm also interested in growth to the west more than the southwest. Again, for that sort of same reason, southwest is cut off by US 30 and west isn't. It gets maybe a little complicated or interesting into Boone County, but I still think that's a way that the city could grow somewhat organically and feel like a neighborhood that's already part of the city. But I'd also support some southwest growth. And And again, these are just, if it were my choice, where would I like the city to grow? I'm not the property owner. I'm not going to make these calls, but that's, several different areas that I think we could grow in. And by designating several, I think maybe we'll be able to deal with this problem of all the eggs in one basket. As for the north area, that also counts as sort of organic, continuous growth of the city. And so I like it for that reason. Maybe I'm just a cheapskate. I'm trying to avoid having to pay for a new fire station every year. But we already have land. Some of it's already in the city. We've talked about it a lot. People are expecting to build in that land. And I'm not at all proposing that we sort of change the trajectory of things that we've already done. But I wish that we didn't have to invest so much up there. And I'm concerned about the transportation impact as we continue adding people there and look at the north-south paths through town. And we've got Grand Avenue and we've got George Washington Carver, and it's just going to get tougher as time goes on. So those are some of my thoughts, and maybe you can see some of the way I'm prioritizing just through that discussion.
I would just concur with what David said. He said basically everything I would have.
I do find it interesting that you mentioned the transportation from the north, because actually among the scenarios, the north has the second lowest vehicle miles traveled, which I think we were told was basically the proxy for sustainability for transportation. The first of those, the lowest, is the south with no I-35 interchange, which is interesting in and of itself. I'm not sure what to make of that. But perhaps the least favored option, because it's landlocked, is the north with no connectivity to anything. You put too many people in there, you can't get them back out to go to jobs and everything else.
To the north.
So even the east has the potential for people to be moving in and out more easily than the north does. And the east, I think, has some things going for it, but certainly when I drive around the areas, the east is not the one that says to me, this is Ames. It says this is a development across I-35. So it's not my favorite place to develop, but I think it is actually more connected perhaps than the north is, if we're trying to get people out of that area into city center, or if we're trying to get them to jobs at the research park or the industrial area, Prairie View. So I'm not as against the east as I might be. If I had my choice, I guess I would say infill is number one, but recognizing that you cannot achieve your growth entirely in infill. I actually prefer the south because I think it has options for establishing new patterns of development and creating a place that has an identity that is its own, as well as connected to the city. And I also think that with the South, we have the opportunity in the distant future, not immediately, to actually solve some of the problems that are occurring right now in Tea Garden, to solve some of the transportation issues. If we have enough people in that area to put through new roads, to create a new interchange on I-35, to think big about how those kinds of connections can help us address some of the problems that we're currently facing. The wild card in all of that, of course, is that it's dependent on the state to open up land and on the federal government to be willing to allow us to create an interchange. So we'd be gambling, but if we are gambling with a vision, maybe that's at least a better reason to do it than simply to throw in for the South because it looks easy. I think it is in our best interest to develop in several areas as opposed to just one, because I do worry that inflated land prices could be a very real deterrent to growing in the directions that we want to grow, and may in fact cause us to grow in those directions that we did not favor.
I would echo some of what's already been said. I think it's important to grow in multiple areas, maybe not all tier 1 scenarios, but the South would also be my preferred for expanding into multiple tiers. I think it has a good approach with connectivity and transportation and proximity to a lot of places in Ames, especially the growing research park. And that would be my choice for if we had tier 1 scenarios and then designated a few or one tier 2. South would be my first choice for that.
Okay. Any other input before we go to a short period of public input?
Mayor, do you have any opinions?
I think that council's done a very good job of summarizing. I think as we, as I listened, I think there's a lot of convergence and a lot of agreement on a lot of these things. I do think that I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. First, I think that it makes what Gloria said and others have said. I'd be leery of having just one area. I think you could risk inflated land prices, and who knows when that property is going to come on. So a tier 1 in multiple directions. I think that I will comment. I do live in the southwest part of Ames. I live south of Oakwood Road, out there. There's no commercial center besides a gas station. And I would say that people absolutely, love it. We don't even have a school, in that area like Tea Garden, has Cape Mitchell. And there is quite a sense of community. So I do think that is possible to achieve. And I think it depends upon the residents in that area. And so, but I would agree. The more I personally have thought of it, I think that South is really a tremendous opportunity. Research Park has talked about trying to get 2,000 to 3,000 more jobs in the next 5 to 10 years. The connectivity across going south of the airport, over to Riverside Drive and slipping over there. I understand that the interchange is going to be at the mercy of the state. I also agree with Gloria that maybe we can do some investments to help in traffic, but that interconnectivity going south, I think, has tremendous possibilities. East, I think, is intriguing, but maybe that's in the 2060 plan. I think that the next 20 years, there can be definitely some organic growth, and I definitely think that looking for opportunities for infill would be great. But I think we've talked about this before. That's a much taller hill to climb, a lot more challenging from a cost standpoint. Trying to amalgamate properties, trying to get things worked in. I do agree with we talked about, AUDs, accessory unit, ADUs, accessory dwelling units on properties. But it depends on what council does for a policy. If you try and incentivize that, maybe you see more of that, occurring if that's a high priority. So I just think it's been a very robust conversation. I think it also reflects, a lot of the input that we've gotten, and it's to try and provide the best opportunities for our community to grow in some flexibility without trying to constrain it just to one particular area. Those are my thoughts, and I'm greatly encouraged by what everyone has shared, and I think that you've given a lot of thought to it and come from a little different directions. But I think it's going to give staff some good direction based on what you decide to give them tonight. Anybody else have any more quick comments before we open up for public input? Okay. I have no cards up here, but I'm going to open up public comment. I'm going to ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. And if you have spoken before, we allowed over 2 hours of public input on January 7th. So I'd ask if you want to come up and offer other input, you're welcome to, but we'd ask it be in a different vein or topic or direction. Anyone want to address? Yeah, Chris? Kim, sorry. I'm having a problem with names, and I just asked Supervisor Merkin. Go ahead.
Kim Christensen, 2985 South Dakota Avenue. I've got four things, and I'm a little bit preaching to the choir because I absolutely agree with you that it should be infill is number one. Tier 1 makes absolute sense economically. But if you're going to be putting money into Tier 2, I strongly urge you to go exactly where you're thinking, the South. I mean, so many times in this town, as I've lived here for almost 50 years, the town swells 25 to 100% in one day, and the traffic that's coming off of Highway 35 into the city would really be served much better in the long future with a new interchange to the south, not the north, but the south. And so those, I'm really encouraging you to go where you're headed. I have one other issue, though, and that is probably with what Kelly had just said earlier. I take issue on no rural subdivisions contiguous to the city. I believe we have a very unique, and I know I'm kind of repeating what I said before, situation in the Southwest, where you have Highway 30, you have a little bit of private land that could be developed as a rural subdivision, and you have 4,000 acres of Iowa State research farms. That is perfect for rural subdivisions, allowing people to live in different types of living situations that they couldn't otherwise have in the city, but yet being close to the city. So I highly encourage you to be a little bit open-minded to that kind of development in very specific situations like that one. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Others?
Kent Vicra, 2625 Meadow Glen Road. And the reason I wanted to talk was more so, I mean, I've only lived there 2 years. So prior to that, I spent 12 years down on Opal Circle, down in the south. And so I'm familiar with the area, you know, and of course, back then a little bit skinnier, but we rode more bikes and stuff. So you were cut off and disconnected. You know, really that gravel, as you came up by the forest, is gravel, and there wasn't a good way out. And to me, the area, the limiting factor was kind of, well, two-income houses and stuff. A lot of people work down in Ankeny. I mean, you both kind of want to live in Ames. We have people who want to live in Ames, but a spouse works down there. And that, it just makes it so nice to go to the south and get on that exit for those types of people. And, you know, ourselves, if you're in Des Moines with something or Ankeny, you get off at Huxley and come back up. Just avoid that coming around 30, especially game day traffic on 69. So, I mean, the thought of having another road to take traffic off 69 and develop out there, I just feel exciting. So I want to talk on a different topic, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Okay.
That's what's scary. There's only two people.
Well, what I do appreciate is there are people that are here tonight that spoke and you listened. And so I think they're just honoring the fact that they have nothing else to add at this point. So, and this won't be the last time for public input either. I mean, it's just, we're at this juncture where you're going to get some direction, but there'll be additional input sessions going forward. All right, we'll close public input. Thank you. All right, council.
So the infill question, I would like to make a motion to get whatever figure you can bring us that would be, that would look at, what were the ones you listed? Vacant land currently, your estimate for project-based.
Excuse me, are you making a motion now, or you want to make a motion?
I will move.
Okay, thank you.
To ask staff to bring us a number for infill. What we could expect from what I call project-based infill that we either already know about or that's, you know, that you've identified as likely. The vacant land, some stab at what I call policy-based. I mean, I understand what you mean, Kelly. That's a hard figure to get at, but and some measure of timing on each too, if you could. So like I mean, because if we changed the zoning to allow accessory dwelling units, you don't expect them all in the first, that's an overtime thing that, it takes the 20 years to fill in several thousand of those. But I would like some number of what we could expect from info, because at this point, we've just been told it'll be extra. And I think I at least want to see it defined. So I heard once, I think it was mentioned, RDG bounced around like 3,000 people in infill. And that's like 20%. I mean, that's pretty significant, actually. So if we're talking 3,000 to 5,000 or something like that.
Excuse me, let's get the motion.
Oh, sorry, I'll end my motion. You're right.
All right.
I move to have staff bring back numbers on infill, what we could expect, or a range that we could expect to get, project-based, policy-based, vacant land.
Okay, thank you. For a second?
Second.
Sorry.
All right, discussion.
Too rambling.
Now go ahead if you want to add anything else. You're talking about
any questions? I feel like I rambled enough there.
No, you talked about that RDG kind of talked about.
Oh, RDG, at one point they mentioned 3,000 as what we could maybe expect to get out of infill.
I think that was, I'm not recalling that quote very well myself, but I think that would have been back in the first December meeting when they went through the exercise of showing the redevelopment project areas. And that wasn't directed by council to say, get 3,000. I think he was
off the cuff.
Marty was kind of just saying.
I agree. But that is, 20% is pretty significant chunk. Right?
I'll say that was even earlier than that. This is from a July meeting when Marty said 3,000. So, a lot has happened since then.
I would say that is, if you kind of just think about the last 15 years and you don't, of the 3,000, you don't include the vacant land component that I'm going to give you, that's not realistic. Knock down and rebuild or have some policy that people are going to add units on property, 3,000 is overly optimistic.
Well, I'm allowing you to count vacant land.
If Marty was probably thinking like everything, including infill of vacant land, that's a different number. So that's why I want to break it out for you so you guys can kind of understand where these numbers are really coming from.
That'd be great.
And then and we're not asking you, unless you give me different direction, we're not asking you to endorse specific areas for redevelopment because we kind of highlighted those previously and we're going to work on that. And that'll be a component of your land use map, those kind of special areas that you want to look at for further investigation or say that those are open for redevelopment options. So we're not getting into that tonight, but that will also be part of that land use map conversation.
No, that sounds good. It's not to target those areas now, but just to get a number on what our goal for infill is going to be. Because at this point, we have not yet put a quantitative number on that.
I think even if from the planning director's chair, one thing the current land use policy plan doesn't do is support infill except for campus town and downtown very clearly, if at all. So even if there isn't a quantifiable number, but the council supports that concept, having very clear goal, or I don't know the format of the chapter yet, but the idea that a high level goal or a very clear policy that the city wants to see housing produced within defined areas or in the existing area will be very helpful when you get questions for changes that you hadn't anticipated. And it'll give you one reason to either to think about that as maybe being a positive thing, just because the plan's going to have a lot of competing interests. But if you don't have an affirmative statement that you're in favor of infill, it's an uphill climb to even bring that topic to the council. So think that through. I'm kind of coaching you that when we get to that chapter, if that's a priority to the council, make sure we're capturing that appropriately, whether there's a number attached to it or not.
Sure.
So I'd like to run on that because I think there's consensus. Can I just make a motion?
We're in the middle.
We have a motion.
You can make another one.
But it's when we're done with that, then come back and follow that up with another motion.
Infill, does everyone have an understanding of when you say infill? Is there a certain boundaries? Kelly just mentioned downtown, campus town. For example, we have the land on South Cedar that's vacant right now. That really isn't meeting the intent of what you're thinking about for infill. You're thinking more in terms of closer to the core of the city. Is that correct? Or what are you thinking, Brown?
So that's why I'm going to break. So the Cedar Lane will be what I will call vacant land.
Okay.
Whether you want to call that infill or not, I'm just going to call it vacant land that's in the city or immediately serviceable by the city.
But at least we can see that number separate from the other numbers.
And there's not going to be a lot of that because there's not a lot of vacant land in the city, but at least give you a chance to, I personally don't like calling the next piece of land annexed to the city infill just because it got annexed to the city. That's not my personal belief of what infill is,
Right.
but I'm going to give it to you and let you guys sort out what you want to label it.
Okay.
Sure.
So I have a question. With regard to policy-based infill, you mentioned accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
Are you also looking for changing the zoning code to do away with single family, for example, or allowing smaller lots? Because those are all policy kinds of decisions too.
Yeah,
But I'm not sure how wide you want staff to cast their net.
Well, I'm sure, so Kelly, other zoning changes that Gloria mentions will be part of that conversation too.
So zoning won't be directly. That's follow up to establishing the policy through the plan. The housing category, the housing chapter is your next major topic. So those questions about what would influence zoning as an implementation tool, that belongs in that meeting. Tonight, there's nothing here for you to react to just say do that or don't do that, but that'll be one of the next 2 meetings that you have.
No, I'm trying to get at how you produce a number. So how many people, you can obviously put more people in if you look at
smaller lot
changes
size.
to lot sizes or those sorts of things. I'm just trying to understand what I'm voting for.
I think that those are included in what I mean by policy-based changes, I guess.
So that's where it's really hard to tell you because we've
I
spent
understand.
zero time telling you that, there's a lot of 12,000 square foot lots that become 6,000 square foot lots. That doesn't probably really exist. It's more the ADU conversation than it is breaking up existing properties. Like you can look at Old Town and the half lots, the little squares.
Maybe for the vacant land.
But vacant land's going to be a different assumption than the infill.
But I mean, the size of the lots would matter then because you can build a thing with.
So I think that's just too detailed
Yeah.
for the level of what we can tell you. What we've been working from is these, and I don't have them up in front of me, but Marty has his assumed density ranges that go with those different shades of yellow and orange and brown up there.
Yeah.
They're higher density than current city. So that doesn't mean every project's going to be that. But we have said in the land use chapter that the city would maintain an expectation of at least 5 units per acre in the new areas.
Well, that's what I assume for vacant land is that we're hoping that
So that's the number I would work from.
Off the bat.
To get to 5 units per acre, you have to do something different than quarter lot standard subdivisions.
Yes.
So even though FSRL allows that today, apparently it doesn't allow it in a way that development community is producing it. But from a policy perspective, I think we're supporting the same concept in those new areas. But
Everyone
you'll
understand
have
the
to get
motion?
through that at a different level.
So, I'm still trying to get, so you're going to look at ADUs as the policy.
That's the motion that I understand. All the other ways you could add density, that's going to be beyond what we can do as a
we'll be
task of the next
talking
3
about
weeks.
more of that later too. I mean,
Yeah, some of that is going to have to be follow-up, like
Yeah.
to evaluate the city and understand the layout of lots and homes and what implications a change in policy has versus practically what building code permits and what are the different things that go into it. That's a huge task. It's probably outside the comp plan. Policy to look at that or policy to do that's part of the comp plan, but to tell you what the result is will be really hard to estimate with any level of accuracy, maybe some range.
I think this is a good motion, and I want to make sure that we shouldn't fixate on the numbers too much. They're going to be very approximate when they come out, and I think ultimately the decision we'll be making is whether to go like slowly ahead with infill or medium or full speed ahead. That's kind of the granularity that we're going to be working at. I hope that comes next.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Carried. Okay, Tim, did you have something you want to throw in?
Sure. I think there's consensus on the infill, so I move that we direct staff, and I'm not sure the wording of this, but that we would, as part of our 2040 plan, we would create an emphasis for infill.
Second.
Discussion?
It might be helpful to be a little more specific than that.
Yeah.
Well,
What is emphasis?
for now, that's enough because that'll
I mean-
shape how we bring stuff back in the housing chapter. And when you get to the land use map, you have specific areas. You're going to be endorsing something much more specific as we go.
Aren't you going to
along.
wait to get the data back and that may lead to more specific goals, right?
I think we're
Yeah, it's fine.
emphasizing infill regardless.
Okay, fine.
I mean, you can augment that as we go through. All this is going to do is tell us the perspective of how to draft the first draft.
Mhm.
And then if that's not satisfactory, make it stricter, make it looser, however that works, make it quantifiable. That's all still to come if this motion passes.
Further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Carried. Okay, how about direction or directions of growth and tiers?
So I'll try a motion. I think we could spend a lot of time working on different configurations. So I'd like to test the waters just on a tier 1 approach. And so I would move that we would ask staff to create an emphasis for tier 1 development in all directions.
Second.
Any discussion?
What if tier 1 to the east doesn't yet have ped bike capability facilities? Because it was a further tier by the time that change happened, wasn't it?
Well, what
For tier 1?
I think what staff has said to date, which is subject to different direction, is the easiest time to make the appropriate bike improvements is if and when the interchange becomes an urban interchange, so that what you build under the current conditions isn't thrown away when the urban interchange comes in. That's really the only big ticket obstacle. Obviously, there's a gap from Dayton to I-35 now. That's a normal kind of project to fix and add a linkage there. It's what's the appropriate way to get over or under I-35.
Could you be more specific what you mean? When would it become an urban interchange? At what time?
Only when the traffic labels dictate. So you'd have to see development happen to justify the city's investment and DOT's investment in getting to the
That's why
urban
I'm saying I
interchange.
think that's probably tier 2 or 3 by the time you get.
It definitely, well,
yes.
If all of the commercial happened, that dictates a new interchange. I don't think anybody believes that all of that commercial would happen if nothing else happens out there. That is a very long term to see that much commercial land get built out. Just the build out of the south component, the traffic study doesn't say an urban interchange is needed just for the south, but south plus north or anything else does. So it might not be, I mean, it's probably further down the line, but more development has to happen to justify it. And it could technically happen maybe before housing is built if the commercial is very successful.
Kelly, can I ask a question not germane to this motion? And that is, on the east side, per the image, the blue tier 1 includes a lot of the developers. What he showed us concept to us last year, which included the south was commercial, the north was commercial, with some mixed use, and really there wasn't a huge amount of residential unless you had a little bit of mixed use in that area. And my question is, if council supports this motion and we're going all 4 directions, would that put them in a conundrum if you had someone said, I just bought the property which is east of the commercial development, you want to go that direction, but the commercial development hasn't even started. In other words, you're going to leapfrog a development. I'm just trying to understand. Whereas you go to the north, that's already naturally, organically growing. I would say that probably south is probably very similar from that standpoint, and probably west as well in the tier.
I would say very little is natural and organic. If the city hadn't invested in Hyde, none of that would be possible either. The south is going to need water line looping and extensions. The west can tack on a little bit.
Okay.
I think the east is predicated a lot like all of them. There's one missing link of infrastructure. They all have one thing that has to be done.
Okay.
So we've said the commercial land's already in the city, right? It has zoning, it has a development agreement. It puts all the onus on the developer to build something. They want to come back and renegotiate that. The one ask they have of the city financially is that we would support that sanitary sewer extension. It's a $2.5 million investment, I think, is the working number right now. And the city managers recommended only do that if you can use TIF funds to pay for it.
Yeah.
Don't just foot the bill for that.
Right.
So if somebody else came in and we were okay with that other half of blue, which is residential, and that sewer's not there, they're just like all the other blue and green areas everywhere else. Either you fill the missing link or you have to wait. So I don't think a housing developer could come out there without the commercial piece happening concurrently or very, very quickly to do it, because it's the same situation as the South and the West.
So by
Just
voting
because
for
it's blue
this,
doesn't mean you can do it without something being extended.
so voting for this does not imply that it may be that the east doesn't even come till the tail end of the 2040 plan.
I think the East is very much dependent on the currently annexed commercial land being built. I don't understand how something else will happen out there without that. I think it'd be hard to say, let's go build a housing development out here, and there's another half mile of farm fields between us and I-35, and there's no prospect of that being filled in, to realize the way RDG has drawn that out. I mean, it could happen, but I don't think that would fit anybody's expectation of the proper order to happen out there.
Okay, other discussion on this motion?
I think, like I mentioned before, I like the other 3. So north, south, I like the most, probably. West is all right. I'll vote no, because of that eastern part. It's fine if it passes, right? That's council's decision. I just want to register my own opinion that I think the east is, I don't know that I see that as a good fit.
So did what Kelly say encourage you or discourage you?
I would almost say discourage, because if the commercial doesn't work out, there won't be anything. But I don't want us to say it's a growth area we're accepting of if the commercial falls through and we don't want people to extend out there.
Okay.
I would also say that East isn't one of the areas that's my favorite, and I'd kind of like to see us move in a tier 2 in another direction, kind of prioritize that as opposed to a tier 1 to the east. So that's my thought perspective.
So I want us to think on a macro level. A large number of people who live in Ames work in the metro area, and for them, having access to a housing area that is immediately off of I-35 could be incredibly valuable. We're going to be putting in a substantial industrial area very close to that, and actually be very convenient for people, far more convenient for people who live in the east who are working in the research park to get to work than if they live in the north. So I just think there are an abundant reasons why, from a long-term perspective, east makes an immense amount of sense. And on the issue of bike infrastructure, a huge proponent of bike infrastructure. I want to see every neighborhood of Ames connected with bike trails. I think it's a question sometimes of timing and to what degree is that component going to be the driver of an entire project. So I want to just sort of keep some element of balance there. So.
Yeah, I think the proximity to jobs is the most compelling piece for the east side. And I don't think this motion is I'm assuming there's probably going to be follow-up motions to prioritize tier 2 areas after this vote.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's true. I just figured there are some of the scenarios where they show just tier 1s in the other 3, and that's enough to get that 15,000 mark. So I guess I felt like if you could hit that number without going in every direction, I thought that would be as good too.
So one thing that there's gonna be a lot more to come with whatever you vote on tonight, but that doesn't, just because you pick all the tier 1s tonight and whatever else comes into that, doesn't mean you can't have specific policy about how you think those are going to be shaped. If the consensus of council is that, man, we can't imagine housing out here without the commercial first, that can be articulated in the comp plan. So it's not just a blue area that we expect something to happen with no direction. It can be very clear that we expect this first before we would ever see housing, not just because of infrastructure, but because we want to see this happen as a community in this order. So I think all of these areas have different influences you can put into the plan as we start to figure out more about what they mean.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried 4-2. Okay. Any other motions regarding tier 2, tier 3, other directions?
So Kelly, I actually didn't come prepared tonight to do a deep dive on a tier 2 or tier 3, just because from my perspective, just going forward with the tier 1 gets us started. And then as opportunities develop, then we could pivot. I'm a little bit apprehensive about committing resources to a horse that we don't know is ever going to leave the gate. So I'm curious if there is some counsel you would give us. Would you recommend that we spend time prioritizing tier 2 or even 3 development at this point?
So it's pretty clear no one is interested in just saying we're good with all tiers of one geographic area of the city. I think that's clear from everybody.
You mean as the sole direction?
Well, not even the sole, that we're into all 4 layers of something as a commitment of the land use of the land use component of the comp plan.
Well, it seems like the southernmost area, we're all really liking that interchange, right? And that's pretty much tier 3, isn't it? So
the
in
traffic
that
part's
sense,
kind of there's a lot of traffic issues there. So how that gets sorted out in tier 2 or 3 is yet to be determined.
but we could say that it's pretty clear consensus that we are all in favor of eventually, and I don't know how you phrase that, right? But eventually, if things work out the way we imagine they're gonna, of pursuing that interchange.
So I think, so if you highlighted south, I mean, I don't know if you're talking about doing 2 and 3 down there. If you're going to highlight a whole area as to plan around this whole area happening, that's very, very helpful to us. But if you can't see that in the horizon of the plan, you don't have to worry about prioritizing 3s, because we're going to make those reserve areas.
Right. But I mean, the interchange, for example, we could tell you that we envision that's would be a likely benefit, right? Or
That comes with 3.
it seems like we're all interested in that, right?
It would seem that if council gave direction saying that the south is really where you'd like to kind of move towards, it also would free up staff to start talking with probably DOT and other entities saying, hey, this may be 5, 10, 15 years on the road, but the point, it takes a long time to get the stuff in their queue to explore that. There also is some, Story County conservation, land out there by the interstate. Who knows, we could be developing, and other recreational opportunities there as well too. And also with the research park, looking at that as well too. So personally, I heard almost unanimous consensus in terms of the South as being a very attractive area, and also gives staff some opportunity to kind of get some direction and some conceptualization. Absent that direction, they'll just be looking at the blue areas, and then we won't have anything else in terms of of a small mini center. Is that correct?
So, my caution on just picking blues is, on paper it shows 15,000. Infill is going to be another layer. So on a total person calculation, looks fine. I struggle to see a vision of a place if you just pick blues. So that's where we've encouraged you to, if there's an area, as the mayor's saying, whether it's south or somewhere else, that you could see a full build out of that area as the future of Ames, maybe not in 15 years, but over 25 years. Tell us that now so the plan can support that and we can look at how that works. We won't necessarily say all of a sudden, all this land's going to be absorbed in 20 years. It's going to set the framework for how it gets done in the next plan as well.
Okay.
So my only concern about that is that we're still then picking one direction and possibly inflating land prices in that direction if we commit to only one complete build out.
But you have a lot of land in the blues, and if you, there's only tier 2 really in the west and the south. The other 2 areas don't have it. The purple can't happen without city investment. So whether you pick it or not, the purple's kind of irrelevant until the city puts money behind that to make it happen. There's no developer that can carry the cost of making a purple happen.
So we
their own.
could do both the west and the south tier 2s just
I
because
think for
they're
planning, I think it makes sense to set up a plan where these are areas the city could see investing in as needed to support our goals of providing for housing choice. And I'm hearing a lot of interest in supporting job centers here and the core of the city. We didn't highlight this for the west, but but the back way to Ankeny and the north side of the metro is to go down South Dakota.
That's the point.
It is a commutable route. There's a fair amount of traffic comes north that way as well. So from a job centric viewpoint, the west and the south have similar benefits. ISU research parks in the middle of both. Highway 30 access is great out of a lot of that area, which is different than the north. And again, the east has some big ticket items to really see that future. I think you could look at that very easily and say plan around that as a concept.
All right, I'll make a motion then that we incorporate the tier 2 areas in the south and the west into the plan.
Second.
Okay, and for discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Carried. Very good. All right. I think that is that what you need, Kelly, for tonight?
Yeah, we can move forward and start to put this together to feel like it's going to be a plan.
Good.
Is there any reason for us to indicate that we are not interested in growing to the north beyond tier 1?
No.
It seems that absent, no motion, just kind of communicating that as well too. And we're going to.
Yeah, I don't need a vote to say don't do this unless what you're really saying is don't even show it as a reserve area. Because what's not endorsed tonight, we're going to show as reserve until you tell us not to.
Right.
So if you're saying don't even reserve it, that would be a strong statement that we could work with.
We made that mistake.
You don't need a motion for that. Is that correct?
To do what?
You're
Tell us what
already
not to
going
do.
to show it in reserves automatically.
Yeah, because that's what we've been telling you
Yes.
is that's what staff's
That's what I
going to do
thought. Yep.
absent other direction.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff we're going to do unless you tell us to do it
Yes.
otherwise.
Okay. Very good.
Mayor, I have a motion about
Yes.
climate action planning, right? And so this is just to wrap this up, I think. We discussed the climate action planning pretty extensively at goal setting. And I know there has been a lot of interest in how our climate action plan might interact with the comprehensive plan, and are we missing the boat by not taking care of that now? But I think as a group, we sort of agreed on how we're going to treat this, and we'll see if you agree with this phrasing. I would say that, well, I'll just make a motion. I would move that subject to significant community input during the development of our climate action plan, and aiming for broad community support for its recommendations, it's the city's intent to develop and implement a climate action plan to address the climate crisis. Furthermore, the city intends to amend its comprehensive plan as may be appropriate in order to be consistent with the climate action plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
So, David, in my 6 years, this would be the first motion that I can remember, and maybe some of the other veterans can correct me, where we really don't do anything as a result of the motion, okay? So I believe we have communicated, and we're going to be allocating in the budget funds for a climate action plan. So that box is checked. And the second prong of the motion was that we are able to amend the comprehensive plan. And Kelly has confirmed for us we can amend the comprehensive plan. So both of those things are already done. The challenge I have with this motion is we have no idea what's in the climate action plan yet. And so I think we've got everything, those two prongs that you're wanting, we already have. And so it's really a motion without effect.
I would say, sometimes, and this motion seems to be doing this, it's to reassure people, right? So we might very well plan to do the climate action plan, and we very well might plan to amend the comp plan if the climate action plan, relates to it. But this motion is just stating our intent to do so, to reassure people who have brought up climate as an issue for the comp plan that we will wrap them all together eventually. And so I guess that's how I see it, is it's reassuring people of what we intend to do anyway.
So how should I vote for this if I'm not sure I'm not voting on a climate action plan tonight that I haven't seen what's inside it. So how would I vote on this?
So the way the motion read was that it's the city's intent to develop a climate action plan, and we intend to amend it as required or as may be appropriate to be consistent with the climate action plan. So if that's your intent sitting here, that we're going to do a climate action plan and that we're going to amend our other plans in the city as we conclude are required by the climate action plan, then I would say you should vote yes on this now. This is just putting us on record as stating what our view of how this is all going to unfold is going to be, because you're right that we know that we can amend things we've done in the past. We can change ordinances. We can do that, but this I think is an attempt to bring it together and show how the climate planning is related to the comprehensive planning. And the fact there is that we have two parallel tracks, and it's hard to synchronize them fully. We kind of don't want to just stop all the work that we've been doing in order to go do a project that is really going to take a different type of work altogether.
Right, I agree.
And then circle back around and only then continue this. So this is really just trying to explain what council's up to.
And I do think it's important to recognize all of the community input that we've had about climate issues with our comprehensive plan, and this motion addresses that and kind of shows our intent to continue that in the future.
Yeah, I would just agree with and support what Rachel just said. Just going back and looking through the public input we got on January 7th, there was a number of people that appeared and expressed that concern, and I think that it's just validating and affirming council's commitment. There's other discussion. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining?
Nay.
Okay, motion carried. All right, very good. Thank you, Kelly. We're going to move on. We're on item 30, 2020-2025 capital improvement plan. And tonight we are going to receive public input. Council did review this booklet with staff, and it was extremely well done. So tonight we're going to open it up to public. And I have two cards of individuals that would like to address council on this, and then maybe others in the audience. So Ron Gardner, if you want to go ahead and start us off. Ron? So you want to just take the microphone, go to the microphone, introduce
David Denon is the lead on the Access A to Hayden for the Skunk River Paddlers. I'd like to have him speak first, and then I can follow up after him.
Okay.
He's the most interested person regarding the ADA dock that we're hoping to put in.
Thank
Come
you.
on up.
So is this microphone?
Yes.
David Denhan, 1804 Maxwell Avenue in Ames. I'm just here. I'm aware that the CIP came in front of City Council last Tuesday. I'm representing the accessible dock put in at Ada Hayden. And it's in the second year of funding, so I'm just here in support of that project. We've worked with Parks and Rec, and they've asked us to do some matching funds. We've started that process. We're up to about $14,000 at this point.
How much was that?
14,000. So the project is basically for a way for handicapped people to more easily access Ada Hayden. Works for kayaks and canoes, and the proposal that we're looking at is for a product called a board safe dock. I traveled to Ohio, which is the closest dock, to look at it, and it looked like it'd be appropriate for use at Ada Hayden. I think that's all I have.
So David, are you advocating for just for the project and you're okay with the schedule, or what specifically would you like the council to know on your input?
I'm speaking in favor of it. We're happy with funding in 21.
Okay.
That gives us some time to do more fundraising. So, and I wasn't sure exactly how with the CIP it works, if you vote on all at once, or if you look at specific projects and say yay and nay. So just wanted to keep it there in the second year funding.
So to answer your question, yes, we vote on everything, or we might pull something out or add to it. And it's as presented unless it's amended by council.
Okay.
And I just want to
At
say,
wrap-up you vote.
pardon me?
At wrap-up time you vote.
At wrap-up time, yeah.
The federal-
Not tonight, but at wrap-up time. And I just want to thank you for helping raise funds towards this worthy project. I think council was extremely, I know I was blown away by the concept. It looks very exciting. And I think that there's anticipate some broad support. But anyway, appreciate your helping out to raise some money to go towards this project.
And the closest one is in Ohio.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Drove all the way out to Ohio to look at this for the city.
Yeah, it was Western Ohio, but
Well, I don't
that's
care
better.
where in Ohio. That's amazing. Well, thank you for doing that.
Sure.
And perhaps what we do here at Ada Hayden will serve as a guide and perhaps an inspiration to other recreational areas to do something similar. So thanks for your efforts. For
absolutely. And I think it works well with the Miracle Park here in Ames. I mean, be dovetailing together.
Very
those
nicely.
programs.
Yep. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Ron Gardner, 2223 Prairie View East here in Ames. I'd like to follow up with David's comments. This originally planned, the ADA accessible dock was because one of our paddlers' husbands was disabled. He had some kind of an affliction where he couldn't move and he's locked up in a wheelchair. And I thought we'd like to get him out of it and out on a canoe where we could paddle him around. But in the process, it takes some time, and he ended up being in a hospice, and he had passed away before we could get this even in the plan. But I want to thank you for putting it in the plan for your consideration. I'd like to see it sooner in place than it is 2 years from now. If we come up with enough funding, perhaps there could be a proviso in there. If we come up with enough funding to match what we have already, the city's put in, we might be able to increase come sooner to have it installed, but it just depends on how much we can raise up. When I was a little boy, you never saw people in wheelchairs. And they just weren't there. They weren't even second-class citizens. They were tertiary, third-class citizens. And you looked at them, well, they're disabled. They're handicapped, and we'll just shove them off to the side. But since these ridiculous wars we've had, these young men are coming back with limbs off, and they're not about to sit around and be shuffled off to the side. And more they're getting involved with activities, and they're getting involved with society and culture and politics and in sports and a lot of things. And the difficulty we have in getting some people to understand this is that we are in the leading edge of the adaptive sports in particular, because this would be a sporting type of event. And so a lot of the people who are in wheelchairs, they may not even consider a paddle, never thought of it, but eventually we can convince them with a lot of promotion to get this done. And this is, as you said, it could be an example for the Midwest because there's not a lot of them. This board safe is the best quality and is most durable of all of in there. So I think we thank you in advance for considering it in your capital improvement plan. And if there is a proviso to get it in sooner, that would be great. A lot of people would be very happy with that. Mm-hmm. We thank you in advance for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. Other public input on the capital improvement plan?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Dan Culhane with the Ames Chamber of Commerce and 3115 Aspen Road here in Ames as a citizen. I heard just in the last few days about the discussion you might have had about a splash pad and a skating rink in downtown Ames. And it's timely given the conversation we've had in over the last several months and more recently. In fact, today we released our new plan for the next 3 years for the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Organization. And one of the key objectives is placemaking. And that's a buzzword that when we did our plan 3 years ago, we had never heard of before. But with the number of folks that take really good jobs in this community, but choose to live elsewhere, It's things like this. It's amenities and infrastructure like that that I think would be helpful to our cause in trying to help the next 15,000 people you talked about a little while ago move to Ames. And so certainly a vote of confidence to put that in the CIP. It's things like that that will make our community very unique and interesting, much like the Miracle Playground and some other things we've got here in our community. And so anything that you can do to enhance livability in our marketplace is most appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public input. And we're going to move on to item 31, discussion on policy regarding waiver of downtown parking meter fees for special events.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is revisiting an item that was on an agenda a number of months ago regarding the city's policy related to parking meter waivers. We have gathered for you some background information regarding the number and extent of requests for waivers in the past several years, as well as some information regarding what other communities do to approach parking meter waivers. And I think the theme of the other community feedback is that there are lots of different approaches here. Some cities waive parking meter fees, some do not waive it at all, and some are kind of in the middle, which I think is sort of where we are at. We've put together for you a couple of different alternatives depending on what your interests are. I think if the council was to make a major change, which would be to require repayment of all parking meters requested to be waived, then there's a fair chance that we would see increased requests from the organizations that request funding from the city through that outside funding request process. Some of the funding that you allocate specifically to those to a handful of organizations goes to putting on special events named in the contract. So there might be some implications of that if you were to modify the policy. So we're happy to answer any questions. Deb, anything to add?
Nope.
So I'd like to see what we can do to help.
Okay.
Well, I'd just like us to be consistent. I'm particularly interested. Well, I think that we can maybe focus on the events where we are waiving the meter fees for parking spots that are not even being obstructed by the events, because that seems like a different category of event to me. When you have an applicant who is saying simply, I'm having this great event downtown and I want people to not have to pay for parking downtown, but they can park anywhere, anywhere they want. I would like to see us treat those sort of applicants more consistently than we have in the past. I think when it comes to a request to obstruct some parking spaces, that will continue to come to council and we'll have to make a decision about whether to approve those requests. We could use that as a proxy to say, yes, if we approve the obstruction of the parking spot, then we will also waive the fees. That's just one of the options.
So you mean for events, we'd waive the fees if they're blocking off, if they're using those spaces.
If the event,
right. Yeah.
If the event is sort of interesting enough to use that space for some part of the event, then if we changed our policy, then we could just understand that by approving the obstruction permit, that we would by default also be approving the waiver of the fees.
So I think we did receive some input from several of the downtown merchants about the positive impact of waiving parking meter fees for their dollar days that they've just had. And I can see how that would be a positive incentive for people to come downtown and spend money. And having a vital downtown is important for the community. I am wondering if there might be another alternative. This came to me yesterday, so I have not approached anyone. I wanted to talk to Steve about this first, just to see whether it was something that would be doable. That doesn't mean council will want to do it, but I'm wondering if, so that we can get a sense of our parking fee structure, which we don't really have a clear sense of because we're offering lots of waivers. We don't really know how much money we're bringing in or going to bring in the coming year because we have these waivers that keep knocking down our parking fund. If in the short term, for the next, say, 2 years, council were to set aside a certain amount of money, perhaps $13,000, which is right around the average requests that we usually get, out of our council contingency fund, so that the parking fund does not take a hit, but we are subsidizing the parking. We could then encourage groups to submit their requests for their events early. We have had in the past very late submissions of requests, so it could actually help with that process. And it would possibly counter the argument that the Main Street is getting preferential treatment because everybody has the opportunity to apply for the money from this pool, but it is a capped amount. And once that money is gone, it's gone. And it would allow us to separate the waivers from what we're taking in the parking fund and assess how healthy that fund is in the regular course of events.
I don't hate the idea.
Well, that's a positive thing.
I just don't want to overcomplicate things either. I'm not opposed to having a policy, but I think there's some merit in us actually giving preferential treatment to downtown Ames. I mean, we contract with them to provide us with services. And so I think it makes sense for us to continue to support their organized events that we contract them with, and to do that by waiving parking meter fees when they have those district-wide events downtown. I don't necessarily, I'm not really married one way or another to how we develop policy on all of the other outside requests, but I do think that we should continue to support district-wide downtown Ames organized events.
So I don't have anything against supporting Main Street. I'm a huge Main Street supporter.
Yeah.
But Main Street sets its slate of events very early.
Right.
And in the past, we have actually had troubles getting requests for those events. Now, that has been turning around. We have new management for Main Street, but if they're setting their events early, they could make their requests early.
I don't know if I love the using council contingency money. It doesn't really do anything to the stability of the parking fund other than just supplement it from contingency, which I would rather have a really neat project rather than just saving parking meter money with our contingency dollars. But I'm not necessarily opposed to, supporting the Main Street events, but I think that there's value too in like the example, of course, here that we're talking about is Ames Pride. We turned down most of the bulk of their request, right? And their argument, and I think rightly so, is that there are cultural events that bring a value that's not an economic value, but there's a cultural capital, cultural value that gets that comes with certain events, right? And I don't know that I don't necessarily value the financial value more than that cultural value. I think for me they're on a similar ground. So I appreciate the goal of just making it consistent, whatever we do, really.
Yeah, and I would agree that I also think that I would like to support community building events of all sorts of kinds, not just shopping events. And also, now that we're talking about it, I wonder if it's probably not a great practice for us to enter into a contract with Ames Main Street for particular services with the sort of side understanding that we're also going to waive something else in an ad hoc way as part of the budget. If we want to support them and parking is part of what they need for the event, we can put it in the contract. It's very straightforward. And I would rather have that expectation actually spelled out in something that we do than just kind of using it as a catch-all to say, well, we have to support them, so that's why we're doing this. Other people who come and apply for it then don't get that sort of treatment, and it's very confusing for people.
I think to go back to the Pride event, I think that's sort of the catalyst issue. For me, the reason why I was not supportive of that is because the event was isolated in its area, and it didn't seem like it made sense to waive the parking meter for the entire downtown for an event that was in a specific area. It's always seemed to me that the case-by-case basis, although we lacked a policy, seemed to work. So I'm sort of sad that we're getting rid of something that it may not have had a nice, neat policy that we could turn to chapter and verse on, but it was functional. But I think it's very difficult once you decide you want to have an agreed upon policy. I think it's going to be sort of difficult to make this work.
Well, what if the policy were Main Street, yes, the Main Street organization, yes, we'll support them. Everyone else is still case by case.
I don't know if that really clarifies
I mean, if it's
what's.
in the contract.
I'd
I
rather put it in the
mean,
contract.
you could say the first part, yes, Main Street, yes, we put it in the contract, and then everybody else. I think you do need to limit it to the confines of the event. I don't think it makes sense to waive parking in the entire downtown district every single time there's an event downtown. As much as I love having events downtown,
Yeah.
I hope that we continue to have more and more. I mean, we had, 9 events requested waivers last year. I would love to see us have, events every week. And it just doesn't fiscally make sense to waive the entire downtown area every single time there's an event down there.
I think you're right. The dollar numbers we're talking about aren't that big per event, right? $1,400 is the amount that was shared both by the Ames Main Street event example and Ames Pride. And I think that Tim, I think that they really are very comparable events because both are trying to attract people downtown for the purpose of something else happening downtown. And so, sure, for the Ames Pride event, it was mostly on 5th Street, not on Main Street. Okay, but there were 1,800 people there, so there was a lot of people parking cars. That's my thought.
Well, one of the questions I have is that if we had no free parking downtown, that would seem to be one issue. But there is a lot of free parking south of Main Street, behind the buildings. There is in the neighborhoods. There are in some other, parking lots probably. So I guess we're really talking about is really just about on Main Street and probably 5th and a couple of the cross areas.
Metered.
And we've been talking about the need for the parking fund, and we've had, on long discussions on that as well too. So I would just throw that into the mix in the discussion is that there is parking available. It just so happens that the parking, which is immediately in proximity to something, is not available, but you have to walk a little bit to get to it. So it's just, I'll stop there.
No,
A
the
lot
part
of
of,
it, go ahead, Barman.
I was just going to say the part of me that wants to encourage people to get out of their cars and walk and bike more doesn't really want to waive parking ever, right? I mean, so part of me is like, I don't like that we waive, other than maybe if you're using the stalls in front of the meter that you're waiving. I could see that, right? So I agree with that, with parts of that too.
It's interesting in the staff materials, and you guys did a good job putting this together. You have Iowa City, they don't waive parking parking fees for anything.
Yep.
So Cedar Rapids, I think, was similar. So if it was the interest of the council just not to do a waiver of parking fees, we're in good company. In fact, we've been an outlier for a long time.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's true.
On the other hand, there are also a number of communities that don't have meters.
And they were
don't-
identified in the staff report though.
Yes, but I mean, they don't ever have to waive fees. And so that enters that discussion of parking meters, yes or no, and do we have fees or not? And if the argument is that we have meters to help fund the parking fund, then, looking at the cost per event, but also collectively, we have no idea how many events are going to be requested. So are we saying then that we will approve pretty much anything that happens downtown as long as it's just the meters that are affected, which if everything's going great and Amber gets her way and we have lots and lots of events, could really damage the parking fund? Or are we saying that we don't anticipate that we're going to have a lot of events in downtown Ames, and therefore
Yeah, it's like
we're
the
okay
better
with
we
the
do,
policy?
the worse the parking fund sort of.
Yeah. My concern is that we seem to be arguing two different things. We're either arguing we need money for the parking fund, or we're arguing that we are supporting events. And if we're supporting events and we aren't capping the amount of money that goes out for those events, how do we decide which events get the waiver and which don't? Is it just, well, you came late and we think we've already exceeded our unstated balance?
That's why I kind of think a consistent policy is best, so it doesn't look like certain organizations are getting preferential treatment over others. Something that I've considered it would be to waive the obstructed parking spots, but not for other unobstructed parking waivers.
Just in general, for Ames Main Street, for whatever other organization.
We'll always vote on whether to approve the obstruction or not, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we've had a good discussion. How about, let's get a motion on the table.
I have a couple of thoughts. First is, I think that if we change this policy substantially tonight, that we should only change it tentatively and circle back around with people before we put anything into effect. I just think it would be a mistake to change it on a dime tonight.
What does it mean to change it tentatively?
I mean, we can sort of agree on what we intend to do, but we don't make the final enabling vote on it.
Yeah. So move
You
on.
would make a motion, what you'd like to see put on a future agenda that you'll vote on.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's the right way.
Move on a motion to describe the policy, and then the date you want it on that, the next agenda to vote on.
Because we might change our minds if people get mad at us.
Well, yeah, we need some, I think it would be a mistake to have no one speak to. Is anyone here planning to speak to this tonight? That's my concern. And I just want to make sure that we're not just changing parking just like that.
I know, it just seems like, to Gloria's point, like, we have to make a policy decision,
Yeah.
right? I mean, is it a financial thing? Is it an event thing? I mean, what's our goal here? And I mean, personally, I don't know. I just feel like it's kind of weird to.
Well, if I can frame this, I mean, what I've heard is some recurrent waiving fees for obstructed parking spaces. Maybe if you really are having a policy that greatly deviates from what you're currently doing, maybe it warrants alerting people. But if it's really kind of memorializing what you already are doing, then people are kind of expecting that. In other words, the question I had for when you say waive obstructed, so when you have downtown January days, would obstructed be every?
There's no obstruction.
No obstruction.
So there would not be a waived fee.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so that
is a change.
that would be I think that, because that's actually totally contrary to what Main Street has sent a letter to. And in order to
Right, we
try
have public input.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I feel like I know what I'm fine giving time to get it, but I know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
They're going to say they want that free parking to bring people downtown. They're going to say it's valuable. It bolsters their business. And I don't disagree necessarily that probably people take advantage of free parking when we have it.
Okay.
But that's not, there's some other arguments too than purely that one.
So David, do you have a motion that?
I'll take a stab at it. I would move that we adopt the policy or prepare the policy for a future meeting whereby we build parking expenses into the contracted events that we undertake with Ames Main Street. Okay, we build those into those budgets and otherwise adopt a policy of denying parking meter waivers.
Just period.
Period.
Even for the obstructed spaces?
And we would make a case-by-case decision on the obstructed spaces since those come to council anyway.
Okay, I got lost on that.
I'll second. You can repeat it, but I think I
Yeah, let's make sure this motion is really clear before we.
So
Main Streets
the,
get programmed in.
district-wide Main Street organized events that are part of the contract, we would
give them more money.
We would give them more money to
It
cover.
comes from a different source.
Right.
We're currently giving them that money from the
From-
parking fund.
Right.
And we would give them money up front as part of
Understand.
their contract.
Yeah, it's just a contracted amount.
And then
In their regular contract, you have to increase that. So it's more
Yes.
money.
Yeah.
all other events, there would be no parking meter waivers. But if you're obstructing parking meters, those would be looked at on a case by case basis, just like we do now.
Right.
Okay, that's where I'm not clear. We are not going to waive the fees. So basically, that's last part is about, do we grant obstruction
And
permits or not?
And
waivers.
waiver.
They would go together. That's
Yeah.
it. No,
So
But I-
farmer's market.
Right, but I
right?
thought that the motion said we would otherwise deny parking meter waivers.
except when there is an
Downtown-wide.
Obstruction.
Except when?
Yes.
Okay.
In which case we would decide on a case by case basis because those come to council for the obstruction permit anyway.
Makes sense. So your farmer's market would be.
So it allows Main Streets theirs, but it doesn't come from the parking fund.
Yep.
Basically. It comes from a
I
different.
mean, we're committed to supporting those events, and I think we're totally right that they're going to come back around and say, well, you just shorted us some money that we counted on for this. And so if we want to support those events, this is a way to do it and yet have a consistent policy otherwise.
So I think would you extend this to CAA as well? We contract with them for certain events also.
Yes, that would be my intent. If we have a contracted event, then I would entertain for the next contract cycle, whenever we can make it happen, to have that sort of the parking component get built into the contract rather than done on an ad hoc basis.
Okay. And just for your information, we'll have the outside funding request information
Coming
to you, I think this Friday. It won't contain information about anticipated parking costs, but we can-
Events. You tell them how many events they're going to have and.
I understand. We need to phase this in gracefully. Okay, I don't want an abrupt change that's going to take people by surprise.
Okay. There's a motion made second, and I'm going to go ahead and open up public input. Just see if anyone is here who wants to make comments. Anyone in the audience want to comment on this particular topic before vote is taken? Normally we have it before the motion's made. Anyone like any comments? Okay, we'll close public input. Everyone understand the motion? Is it clear? Those in favor say aye.
Brian has a question.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So this includes Ames Main Street and CAA. The other component to this that I think is important to recognize, so this, if you're adopting this as a policy, municipal code still requires that all parking waivers have to come through you.
Right.
So this is sort of a self-imposed policy. So when we put the materials together for you, it will include that this is the policy that you've identified you would like, the lens you would like these decisions viewed through. But there's nothing binding you to hold to that into the future.
Yeah,
That's even better.
So I apologize, I'm a little confused still. So dollar days.
Right.
It'd be good.
For everything, disturbed or not disturbed, campus town, those dollar days, that would be everything.
So the point is, on dollar days, no, we're not waiving any parking meter fees, but you're going to put money in a budget to fund that special event? Is that?
No, we would waive parking meter fees.
In the past.
Okay, so there's not clarity then. Okay.
No,
No,
you're
the
going to
idea
give them
was-
money so they can pay us for those.
Yeah. The idea was just to increase the contract amount for the contracted event by the by the amount that the waivers would cost. So you add $1,379 to the budget for the Dollar Days event.
Yeah, that's basically what I was suggesting.
But
with the
not using council
source.
contingency.
Yeah.
But we would still charge for parking meters?
Yes.
No.
No, they could buy out those days.
That's
Yeah.
that's
So
what
you're
I.
not- you're
that
not-
was my
The
understanding.
parking meters will be
Okay,
free, but
yes.
they're not, but they'll be paid. The city will.
They would have to buy
Correct.
them
For the
out.
value of the meter.
So
Okay.
we would contract with them for $1,500 for that cost, right?
Right.
That would be built into their contract. They would pay us that money when we bill them for the parking. So it's taking money out of the local option sales tax fund through the outside funding request process. That's how we fund those.
Right.
And it would be putting it in to reimburse the lost parking meter revenue in the parking fund. So
Yeah,
you're
that was
not
the-
waiving, you are not waiving the
Fee.
the fee.
The meters will be free.
Fee is being paid just through another source. So you're increasing the expense.
Correct.
on the other end.
Yeah.
But they'll have to do this. Now, here's where it gets tricky. You're about to budget for them. So they're going to have to tell us now how many events they are. We have to calculate the number of days and the lost revenue so we can tell you how much the contract has to be increased.
So they've indicated in their applications which events they'd like to be paid to host, but it may be different than the events that they would like parking
Oh,
waived,
sure.
parking provided free. So we'll have to talk with them.
Yeah. So that makes sense that there would have to be some discussion with the contract holders now to make sure that this kind of all adds up.
I understand the distinction, but okay.
We pay them for their internal expenses, the administrative expenses of putting on the event.
But they had the number of ones they wanted waived. There was a limited number.
Right, but it may not
may not be the
line up
same,
with the ones
right.
that they've listed in their application. We'll have to look at it. We'll talk to
I
them.
get it.
Right. So-
Is everyone clear and comfortable with the motion?
Yes.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining?
Nay.
Motion carried. Thanks, Brian and Deb.
Oh,
Thank you.
you want to bring this back, Brian? We'll probably tell them we'll bring it back second week in February, probably.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I just want to publicize when we'll bring it back. Try for that.
Okay. All right. Item 32.
Second week in February.
Discussion regarding naming a Squaw Creek. Council, you had directed or asked that I work with Supervisor Merkin, and there's a report that is included in the packet. And as identified, the supervisors voted, and their first preference is to rename it Iowa Creek, which is one of the tribes that was here in central Iowa. And then we also included a ISU faculty member who identified that either Iowa or Sauk would be appropriate. It was his recommendation or suggestion to, he favored Sauk. But the process, I understand what transpires is that we will communicate with the BGN, the federal USG, BGN Bureau, something anyway, of names. And they were hoping for unanimity amongst the different groups. You saw that the Hamilton County Board of Supervisors and a number of individual entities, no one was supportive of a name change. So you could have, if Sauk was picked by the council, Iowa by the supervisors, and Hamilton County, that basically you have one vote for each one essentially.
Oh.
So it was my sense from the direction that council was in favor of renaming the creek, and also they were not in favor of using Story as the name. Again, this is a recommendation that goes to the federal government. They make the final decision, not council. They're just looking, but they're affording us the opportunity to weigh in and offer our input.
I think Iowa sounds just fine.
I agree.
Is there a motion?
I would move that we suggest Iowa Creek as our alternative.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion?
I think that makes sense. It sounds like it is for Iowa, whereas Sauk, there are Sauk locations in other states. So why not go with the Iowa if they're both acceptable from the perspective of the experts?
I like the idea too, and I personally would be happy with this. I think it reflects pretty well what I've heard from the Ames community about this. My question would be, do we need to circle back to the tribal historic preservation officers on this, or is this something that we should just say what we prefer here and let the process sort that part of this out?
I think that.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to see if, do you want to make a comment, Linda, in terms of that circling back? Because Linda's really put a lot of time into this as well, too. And she's the one that reached out to 60 some different.
I think I got about 60 email addresses from the state archaeologist's office. And
I'm sorry, you want to introduce yourself and your
I'm
address?
very sorry. Linda Merkin, Story County Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
And we did reach out to an email list, I think of about 60 tribal historical preservation officers we got from the state archaeologist's office, and received 20 some replies. And basically they were all in favor of renaming the creek. Various names were suggested. Iowa was one of the suggestions. Nobody said it definitely has to be this or that. What I got out of it was, please rename the creek.
So the question, do you think of and that was something Dr. Brown talked about, was maybe circling back and using this as an opportunity to really build inclusivity and recognize the fact that we are doing this out of respect, for them. Do you think that prior to communicating this to BGN, because they're not going to look at this until June of this year anyway?
Probably not, but I didn't get a sense, we could circle back.
Mhm.
I didn't get a sense that there was as long as it was a name that was respectful, and maybe referenced peoples who had lived here, who were natives, that I didn't think there was going to be any problem. But
Okay. Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item 33. Hearing on amendment to the 2019-2020 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan.
Good evening. Before you, we talked, been collaborating with the Public Works Department and Parks and Rec to create together a shared use path, and the opportunity have in our current CDBG action plan is to transfer that activity from an acquisition for affordable housing to an acquisition under the public facilities, and help facilitate installing this bike path from Franklin Park over to Wilmouth that will eventually be connected to State Avenue once that's getting developed. And one of the major activities under this would be to purchase a two-story structure that's kind of right in the middle of the path. And so looking at using our acquisition funds to acquire, demolish, and relocate the tenants in that current property to help facilitate the rebuilding of this bike path. This activity required us to do a 30-day comment period and then submit that request to HUD if it's approved tonight, and move forward into making an offer to purchase a property, and also use this as an opportunity to meet our timeliness test for our CBG activity.
Okay, any questions for Vanessa?
Vanessa, is there a time by which we would have to relocate the tenants?
Not right away. I think once we get the property approved, we may allow them to stay there to the end of their lease term, possibly not recommending to collect any rents because that would just add to our pot, or we could reduce something. Once we know the time frame for getting it purchased, then we would contact the tenants and work with them in getting them relocated before we move any further on the project.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Vanessa? Okay, this is a public hearing, so I declare the hearing on the amendment to 2019-2020 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan to be open. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to address council on this? Seeing none, I would close the public hearing, entertain a motion under alternative 1, 2, or 3. It's a rather lengthy motion. If you want to just move alternative 1, 2, or 3, the clerk can go ahead and get that written in.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Okay, moved in second on alternative number 1. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, item 34, I declare the public hearing on rezoning 2800 East 13th Street from agricultural A to general industrial GI to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic or have a question? Seeing none, close public hearing. Any questions for staff on this item? Okay. Entertain motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. All right, council comments. Bronwyn, we'll start with you tonight.
I don't know. Trying to think if I have anything for tonight. I don't think I do. I'll say no.
Okay. Devin.
All good.
Gloria.
I hope that we're going to have a good turnout at the Freedom Fund banquet for the NAACP on the 13th of February. I had the opportunity to attend the screening of the film Just Mercy with the Iowa State African American Faculty Association and NAACP co-sponsors, and they are very interested in getting the city council more involved. So I would encourage you, if you have not signed up to go to the banquet and you are able to go, please attend, because Leon Andrews from the Race Equity and Leadership team at National League of Cities will be presenting, and he is an excellent speaker. That's it.
Thank you. Tim?
One of the fun things about being in city council is we get a chance to learn about people in the community that are doing amazing things behind the scenes. On Saturday, I had a chance to visit the dance marathon at Iowa State. Blown away. 500 college students involved in this effort. This has been going on for over 20 years. They raise a huge amount of money, and I just love seeing college kids invested in things that are bigger than themselves and creating community over something like this. So just really made me happy to visit this. I was very impressed, and I invited their leadership to come and just say hello during a public forum sometime, just for us to say thank you to them. That's all I have tonight.
Rachel?
Nothing tonight.
Amber?
Nothing.
David?
Yes, I have, since we're in budget time, this might not be something that fits in the current budget cycle, but it came to mind. And I'm going to read a quote from the town budget meeting that I think that we should consider. This is from Lindsay Nissen. And Rachel, I'm going to send you this afterwards, right? Okay. And so what Lindsay said was she would like to see the Ames City Auditorium used more. She said a marquee sign on the front of the building that says what's coming, along with a large neon sign with bulbs around it, would be ideal. She said photo opportunities are very important to the younger generation. Many people don't know the auditorium is there, and it's a beautiful theater. She stated that anything that brings attention to arts in Ames helps all our arts organizations. So spoke to the city manager about this earlier today, and I would like to move to ask for a memo on feasibility and cost for a marquee along these lines.
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
Does that also include assessing whether it fits with the historic character of the building?
Yes, we discussed that, and that I would consider that feasibility.
Great.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else
That's all. Thank you.
David, did you want to do something on the
this
issue
portfolio?
of the socially responsible investing?
Oh, yes, I did. And you were going to, you had a motion to an email that you sent, no?
I don't remember.
Okay. Right. We
Oh,
moved.
yes, wayfinding. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your reminder. Now, I have to go back to the place it is in my notes where I was supposed to be doing it and do it now instead. Okay, so.
Maybe I could help tweak
Oh,
this,
got it. Go-
David. So I want to be supportive of this. So I just did a quick bit of research. What you're really talking about is a concept called socially responsible investing.
Broadly spoken, yes.
And it has increased on the bond side from 2016 to last year, 2.4 billion to $13.4 billion. It's a huge shift that's happening as organizations are looking at the impacts of their investing. The real driver of this has been in Europe, so this hasn't kicked in as much in the United States. I would be supportive of a motion. I think we should ask the staff to look at it broadly rather than just on the environmental side. Socially responsible investing also looks at human rights. And so I would be very supportive if you wanted to make a motion. I want to let you carry the water on that since this was your idea.
I'm happy to broaden the motion. I think that's appropriate. I'm not sure exactly what to ask for. To investigate the extent to which it's socially responsible and whether any changes would be feasible. Is that
I'll try to make the motion.
That's fine.
I would move that we direct staff to provide us a memo about the feasibility of socially responsible investing for our portfolio, and leave it at that and let them go with it.
Second.
And that will include climate and environmental concerns.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried.
Thanks, Tim.
And did you want to say about wayfinding? Is that
And I forgot one.
okay? All right.
Thank
Oh,
you,
sorry,
Rachel.
Yeah.
So I have visited with Steve about the possibility of asking staff to work on wayfinding within our existing budgetary structure without using this as a CIP. I think initially we looked at this as having an outside consultant, making this far more of an involved project than what it perhaps needs to be. So I'm going to try this motion. I'm open to suggestions. I would move that we direct staff to investigate the implementation of wayfinding signs, and secondly, to coordinate with the Ames Bicycle Coalition for suggestions on style and location.
Second.
okay? Any discussion?
On the style, so if you do a quick search on wayfinding signs, there are all kinds of styles. Just as a starting point, the metro area has a very robust wayfinding system. If you ever bike down there, the wayfinding signs are very helpful. And my dream is eventually to connect Ames with Polk County. And so it'd be sort of nice to have consistency in the signage. So we're not reinventing a wheel that way. So it's just a matter of figuring out the locations. And Ames isn't that complicated, but there are some locations would be helpful. And ABC, I think, would be a logical group to partner with.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Okay. Anything else, David? You done?
I'm done. Thanks.
Okay. Well, Council, I'm trying to start pushing information to you, but legislature is at it. They've already introduced 300 bills. already.
You sent me the socially responsible.
And Deb Shieldroth and I are connecting with League of Cities. We're connecting with Metro Coalition. We're going to try and keep you apprised of stuff. But I'll endeavor to send to you the legislative updates. But there's a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts already down there at the State House, and nothing at this point that is like, oh my gosh. But there is something that has to do with 411 fund that is moving very quickly. So it's we just got to keep on top of it, and that's what we're going to be endeavoring to do this legislative session again. Okay, we'll move on to disposition of communications to council. There are 5 items.
Okay, the first one is just for your information, no action required. Just telling you we're going to begin prematurely, in essence, negotiating with the youth sports complex people about extending their agreement. It really doesn't expire for some time, but they want to start negotiations now. Just wanted you to know we we're going to do that. If for some reason you didn't want to extend that agreement, you tell us not to. We think we should, so we're going to participate unless you tell us not to.
Hearing none, we'll move on to number 2.
Number 2 was just for your information. I received a inquiry from a council person about whatever happened to our desire to purchase the property on the southeast corner of 13th and Grand has since been sold. I want you to get some information how we could still make the improvements in the future if and when that project gets placed back into the long-range transportation plan. City Council dealt with that. I gave you all the information on that. It was rejected and pulled out. Council told us to back off on that project. So we weren't sure at that time or this time we either need to purchase that property. But if that comes back in and we have to make improvements, we think we could do it without purchasing the property. May have to purchase another property, but not that one. It's only for information, no action required.
Okay, number 3.
This speaks to the request to change the zoning, the allowance of fireworks in regional commercial areas, which is not allowed by the code. Now, it is allowed in other places throughout the city, but not a regional commercial, which is basically the mall, I think, that's been requested. The question is, do you want to add that? Do you want staff to work on a process that would change the law that would allow that? And Kelly's giving you a memo about maybe looking, if you're going to get into that, maybe it should be more comprehensive look. It'll take more time and have to be prioritized.
It looked like one of the options was fairly low staff time though, right? The outdoor sales. I'm pulling up that.
Well, Kelly can speak to it if you want to just answer a
Option
question.
A, basically, addressing outdoor sales display in PRC zones.
Pardon me?
Addressing outdoor displays in planned regional commercial zones. It mentioned in the memo just that took the least amount of staff time.
Well, first you have to decide, do you want to change?
Right. Yeah.
Do you think there's sufficient locations in the city under your current zoning ordinance that allows for the sale of fireworks? Do you think that opportunity should be expanded into other zones? That's the first question. Then if you want to do that, then we can talk about the easiest way to handle it. If you you just want to deal with fireworks, or?
I would move that we place this item on a future agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
I just want to remind council that we talked about this at goal setting, and what are you passionate about? What's, and it's what are you going to support? Because even a little bit of staff time, this is going to come back and you're going to have to, vote on it. So I'm not advocating for or against this. I'm just going to be reminding that we just don't want to be going down trails just because someone has asked for it. And it's just a matter of, is your appetite there to go ahead and go through this process and then find out that, you don't, gets a tie vote or gets voted down, going forward as well too. So
I think this is a complicated issue, Mayor. This wasn't something that the city wanted to engage in.
That's right.
But we have a substantial number of people in the community who value this activity. And it's, and as a general principle, if you think about equal protection clause, you want to treat businesses the same, even if we may not like their product or have concerns with it. So I think this is complicated. And in some ways, I think having it on an agenda would give us an opportunity to gauge public input on this. I'm not set on it, but I think it's worth having the conversation.
So if we were to put this on the agenda, we would be discussing this in isolation, away from the rest of the work plan, which we haven't seen laid out except for the quick pass that Kelly gave us for the goal setting session. And I'm concerned that if we put it on the agenda, we're indicating that we're going to consider this outside of the scope of all the other things that are on that work plan.
Agreed.
That's fair. Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion failed.
Okay, the next one is Caramelli, request for fringe plan amendment. If you want to get into more details on this, like we think we have to, it's a little more complicated. It'll take a council discussion, I believe.
So,
Kelly can answer. It's about getting into the details of it. We're not supposed to be discussing it.
right.
You got the memo.
My question is with
Same
regard to the relationship between this item and item 18 that got pulled off of our agenda. Since we have not yet discussed item 18, which related also to this same property, is this perhaps not the right time to be discussing putting this on the agenda? I know they're separate issues.
Yeah, they're separate issues, but
I'm just gonna bring the same thing up again, you know, in terms of just we want to
I
invest
don't
time.
think there's any relationships whatsoever. This is motivated by somebody who wants to buy the property and establish the use there. I don't think it has anything to do with the gateway sign that's there now.
as a policy decision, are there both positive and negative aspects of moving ahead with this fringe amendment that needs to be discussed, Kelly, in greater detail with the council? Is it a slam dunk to you, or do you think there's two sides?
I think there's nuances to the request. I don't think I could tell you tonight to do it or not do it. I think there's very clear policy questions about whether to do it or not. So that's why you don't have a recommendation to proceed or not to proceed from me. I think if you want to discuss it, it has to be on an
Has to be
agenda.
on agenda.
If you're not interested in it, then you should choose option one and just say that's not something we want to do now.
Yep, same thing.
Option one or option two, council?
I'll go ahead and move option one.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And the last one is just informational.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We will conclude disposition and communication to councils. We need a motion to go into closed session.
Move to go into closed session.
Second.
All right.
Mr. City Attorney?
We'd wanted to switch the order of the two closed sessions.
Mhm.
So
Okay, so I was presuming we would go into closed session and get both at the same time, but we need to do,
because there are two different reasons for going into closed session, two
Gotcha.
different Iowa code sections, we have to go into closed session twice.
okay.
So.
So council, we're going to go into closed session for item 36, and then we'll go back and pick up item 35. And who wants to ask Mark the question of the day?
Yeah, we don't need,
You don't, never mind.
it's a secret.
Mark, do we have a reason under the law to enter closed session?
Yes, Iowa Code Section 21.51C allows the council to go into closed session to discuss matters in litigation or threaten litigation.
Move to go to closed session.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Aye.
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 Hi.
Just need about
Back open.
All right, we are back in open session on item 36. I entertain a motion providing direction to staff on the topic discussed in closed session.
So I would move that we direct staff to proceed with the recommendation that was discussed in closed session.
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Carried. Okay, need a motion to go hold closed session. And Tim, you want to ask, or who wants to ask the question more?
Rachel?
Do we have legal authority to go into closed session?
Yes, we do. Iowa Code Section 20.17 subsection 3 allows us to, the council to go into closed session to discuss collective bargaining.
Is it required that we ask that question?
Because oh, sorry.
Okay. You might make a motion?
Move to go into closed session?
For a second?
Second.
All right, now go ahead.
Is it required that we ask that question?
Because it's listed.
I mean,
like
it
the whole,
says on
you're just
the
reading
agenda.
the agenda item.
The open meetings law says that you can only go into closed session upon the advice of counsel. Okay. So one way to do that is to ask the question every time. And that's a pretty easy way to do it. I could send you a memo before every council meeting saying you have legal authority to go into closed session. And it would accomplish the same thing.
As long as it's
So-
required,
Yeah.
it seems silly if it's written
You're just
here.
right. It's
Explain to us that if the question is asked and if subsequently counsel is sued for something and we have advice that's been on the record
Right.
showing that we have moved into closed section by asking that question, that provides us a blanket
More,
protection.
more protection than
protection,
just having the code section listed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that we read.
But having the code section listed on the agenda is not enough. So I have to
Alright.
give you advice.
Good.
And
Yep.
it's just as easy to do that at the council meeting as,
Sure, that's fine.
yeah.
Good question. Roll call, please. All right, we're back in open session. Entertain a motion ratifying the contract with, or actually, start over. Entertain a resolution ratifying the contract with IBEW, Local 55, electrical workers.
Move resolution.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.